Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a bunch of new stories for you. Let's start right away with the first one. It is titled, "On our anniversary trip in Bali, my wife asked the tour guide to put sunscreen on her back. I was sitting 2 feet away. When I raised an eyebrow, she said loud enough for the whole beach to hear, 'Relax, Mason. If you're jealous, go home.' So I did. Look, I'm not saying I expected my marriage to implode on a beach in Bali, but if I'm being honest, there were signs. Red flags, really. The kind you ignore, because you're too busy pretending everything's fine while your soul slowly dies inside. But that particular Tuesday afternoon, that was the moment I realized I'd been married to a walking reality show for 3 years, and I'd somehow become the unpaid extra nobody bothered to tell about the script changes. The beach was perfect. I'll give it that. White sand that looked like it had been photoshopped into existence. Water so blue it made you question if God had a thing for tropical screensavers, and palm trees swaying like they were auditioning for a Corona commercial. Talia had been talking about this trip for months, showing me Instagram posts from influencers who'd apparently found enlightenment between cocktails and selfies. I should have known better. I should have realized that any vacation requiring that much aesthetic planning was probably going to end with me questioning my life choices. We'd been there for 2 days, and honestly, it hadn't been terrible. Sure, Talia had spent approximately 90% of her time positioning herself for the perfect shot. And yes, I'd become her personal photographer / lighting consultant / human tripod, but whatever. Marriage is about compromise, right? She gets her Instagram content, I get. Well, I was still figuring out what I got, but I'm sure it was coming. Then came the sunscreen incident. We were set up on our beach loungers. The expensive ones Talia had insisted we rent because apparently regular beach chairs were too basic. And I was actually relaxing for once. I had a beer that was still cold, a book I was pretending to read, and the sun doing that thing where it makes you feel like maybe life isn't so bad after all. That's when Talia sat up, did that hair flip thing she does when she's about to make a decision that will definitely affect me, and looked around like she was shopping for something. "Mason," she said in that tone that immediately activated my fight-or-flight response. "I need someone to put sunscreen on my back." Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, "Mason, you idiot. That's your job. You're the husband. That's literally husband duties 101. And you'd be right. Except here's the thing. I was literally sitting 2 feet away from her. 2 feet. I could have reached over and done it without even putting down my beer. It would have taken 30 seconds max. But Talia wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Zane. Zane was our tour guide. And let me paint you a picture. This guy looked like he'd been assembled in a lab specifically designed to make married men feel inadequate. He was 6'2", had abs you could grate cheese on, and somehow his skin had achieved a level of tan that suggested he was possibly part golden retriever. He wore board shorts that hung off his hips like they were afraid of commitment. And I'm pretty sure his hair had its own sponsorship deal with some organic coconut oil company. The guy was basically a walking thirst trap, and he knew it. "Hey, Zane," Talia called out, waving him over like she was hailing a cab in Manhattan. "Could you do me a huge favor?" I watched this happen in real time, folks. I watched my wife, the woman I'd pledged my life to in front of 200 people in an open bar, completely bypass me to ask Captain Protein Shake to rub lotion on her back. And Zane, bless his clueless, chiseled heart, jogged over with a smile that belonged on a toothpaste commercial. "Sure thing," he said. All sunshine and good vibes, and probably zero awareness that he was about to become a supporting character in my marital breakdown. Talia handed him the sunscreen, the expensive organic kind that cost $40 and supposedly had anti-aging properties, and lay down on her stomach. Then, she reached back and untied her bikini top. I sat there, beer frozen halfway to my mouth, watching this unfold like a car crash in slow motion. Zane squirted the lotion into his hands, rubbed them together like he was starting a fire, and began applying it to my wife's back with the kind of attention you'd give to a vintage car or a priceless painting. That's when I raised an eyebrow, just one, a single eyebrow of, "Are you freaking kidding me right now?" Talia must have felt it because she turned her head toward me and I swear to God, she had this smile on her face. Not an apologetic smile, not an oops, I probably should have asked you first smile. No, this was a smile that said, "I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm enjoying your discomfort." Then she said it loud enough that not only did I hear it, but so did the couple from Minnesota 3 loungers down, the group of Australian backpackers playing volleyball, and probably a few dolphins out in the bay. "Relax, Mason. I just asked him to put sunscreen on my back. If you're jealous, go home." The beach got quiet. Not nature documentary quiet, But that specific kind of quiet that happens when people are pretending they're not listening while absolutely listening to every single word. Zane's hands paused for half a second. Even he knew that was brutal. But then Talia laughed and he laughed and suddenly everyone was laughing. Everyone except me. I sat there, beer still in hand, sunglasses hiding what I'm sure was a face that could have launched 1,000 divorce attorneys. Someone from the Australian group actually said, "Oof." Loud enough for me to hear. The Minnesota couple exchanged a look that clearly communicated, "Thank God that's not us." Even Zane looked uncomfortable, though he kept rubbing that sunscreen like his job depended on it. Talia was still smiling, soaking in the attention like it was vitamin D. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted, a moment, an audience, a story she could probably twist into something funny later. My husband got jealous over sunscreen. Would make a great caption for whatever sunset photo she posted tonight. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I didn't give her the satisfaction of looking hurt or angry or anything that she could use as ammunition later. I just nodded, took a long sip of my beer, and thought to myself with crystal clear certainty, "Oh, I will. I will go home." Not because I'm jealous. Not because I can't handle her being friendly, but because I just realized something fundamental. I'd been married to someone who thought publicly humiliating me was comedy, and I'd been playing along like it was normal. So yeah, I was going home. I just wasn't going to tell her yet. Here's the thing about falling in love with someone who has big personality energy. At first, it's intoxicating. It's like mainlining espresso mixed with fireworks and a little bit of danger. You feel alive. You feel like you've won some kind of lottery where the prize is never being bored again. What they don't tell you is that eventually you're going to crave decaf and silence like a desert wanderer craves water. I met Talia at my buddy Dereric's wedding reception. Not during the ceremony, mind you. She showed up fashionably late to that, making an entrance that had half the guests turning around to see who was disrupting the vows. No, I met her at the reception at the bar where she was trying to convince the bartender that a vodka soda with a splash of champagne and 3 lime wedges, not 2, not 4, exactly 3, was a totally normal drink order and not the beginning of a psychological profile. The bartender looked like he was contemplating a career change. I was standing there waiting for my whiskey, trying not to laugh, when she turned to me and said, "Don't judge. I know what I like and I refuse to settle for mediocrity in my cocktails or my life." That line should have been cringe. It should have sent me running toward the exit like the building was on fire. But the way she said it with this smile that was half serious and half making fun of herself got me. She had this energy that made you want to lean in closer like she was about to tell you a secret that would change your whole perspective on life. "Fair enough," I said, grabbing my whiskey. "I respect the lime specificity." "Mason," she read from my name tag. Yeah, Derek had made everyone wear name tags like we were at a corporate mixer because apparently traditional weddings weren't awkward enough. "Let me guess, you're the friend who gives practical gifts. Probably got them a toaster. KitchenAid mixer, actually. Metallic silver. Very practical." She threw her head back and laughed like I just performed a comedy special. "See, I knew it. You're one of those guys who thinks matching towels are romantic. Matching towels are extremely romantic. Shows commitment, attention to detail." We ended up talking for 3 hours. Well, she talked for 3 hours and I listened, laughed, and occasionally contributed a sentence or two. She told me about her job in marketing, her dreams of starting her own consulting firm, her theory that people who say they don't like cilantro are just genetically boring. She was magnetic, the kind of woman who could make a funeral feel like a karaoke night, which now that I think about it, she probably would have tried to organize. Talia was bold, funny, and had this sparkle that made you forget common sense existed. When she talked, she used her whole body, hands gesturing wildly, eyes lighting up, head tilting at angles that somehow emphasized every point she was making. She was confident without being arrogant, self-assured without being dismissive. She knew she was attractive, but she wore it like a comfortable jacket, not like a weapon. That night, she got the DJ to play 3 songs that absolutely didn't fit the wedding vibe, convinced the bride's grandmother to do a shot of tequila, and somehow made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the room, even though I'd barely said 20 words. By the end of the night, I had her number, a date scheduled for Thursday, and the distinct feeling that my life was about to get a lot more interesting. And for the first year, maybe even the first 2 years, it was great. Talia's confidence was sexy. She'd walk into a room and own it. Not because she was trying to prove anything, but because she genuinely felt comfortable in her own skin. She'd strike up conversations with strangers, turn awkward social situations into adventures and make mundane activities like grocery shopping feel like we were on some kind of mission. But somewhere along the line, and I swear I can't pinpoint exactly when it happened, her confidence mutated. It evolved from this natural self-assurance into something else entirely. Something that required an audience. Something that needed constant validation and attention like plants need sunlight, except way more annoying and with worse consequences for everyone involved. The mirrors came first. We'd be walking past a storefront and she'd stop, not to look at what was being sold, but to check herself out in the reflection, adjust her hair, change her angle, take a selfie, then another one. Then 5 more. Because the lighting is perfect here. Mason, you wouldn't understand. I'd stand there like security detail, holding her purse and whatever shopping bags we'd accumulated while she performed what I can only describe as a one-woman photo shoot for an audience of nobody. Tourists would walk around us. Shop employees would watch through the window. I'd check my phone, check the weather, check my will to live. Okay, got it, she'd finally say, then show me 12 nearly identical photos. Which one should I post? They look the same. They always look the same, but God forbid I said that. Then came the Wi-Fi addiction. Every restaurant, coffee shop, or hotel we walked into, her first question wasn't about the menu or the amenities. It was, what's the Wi-Fi password? She needed to post. She needed a story. She needed to check her engagement metrics like a day trader watching the stock market. Breakfast posted. Lunch posted. That weird cloud that kind of looked like a dolphin posted with 3 hashtags and a caption about finding magic in everyday moments. Meanwhile, I'm sitting across from her trying to have an actual conversation, competing with 847 followers and losing badly. The worst part was the men. And look, I'm not some insecure dude who loses it every time another guy exists in my wife's vicinity. I have eyes. I know Talia is attractive. I know men are going to look. That's fine. That's normal. What's not normal is when your wife treats every male interaction like an audition for a role in a romantic comedy where I'm not even a supporting character. We'd be at a bar and the bartender would ask what she wanted to drink. Simple transaction, right? Not for Talia. She'd lean forward, make intense eye contact, laugh at absolutely nothing funny, and somehow turn "I'll have a glass of rose" into a 15-minute conversation about his journey in the beverage industry. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there like a potted plant, wondering if I should just order for myself or wait until she's done performing. At parties, she'd work the room like a politician on election night. Every group needed her commentary. Every guy needed her attention. And if someone didn't immediately respond to her energy, she'd try harder, laugh louder, touch their arm more, stand closer. It was exhausting to watch and even more exhausting to be married to. "I'm just being friendly," she'd say whenever I brought it up. "You're being jealous and insecure." There it was. The defense that made me the villain for noticing that my wife treated every social situation like a performance where she was both the star and the director. I wasn't jealous. I was tired. There's a difference. She loved attention like I love silence. Passionately, excessively, and usually at the wrong time. And maybe that should have been my sign. Maybe I should have realized that someone who needs constant external validation is eventually going to run out of ways to get it from just one person. Maybe I should have understood that confidence that needs an audience isn't really confidence at all. But hindsight's 20/20 and I was too busy being the supporting character in her never-ending show to see that I'd stopped being a husband and started being a prop. The problem with Talia's friend group wasn't that they were bad people. They weren't evil or malicious or plotting world domination from a secret lair. The problem was that they were exactly like her. Attention-seeking chaos coordinators who thought influencer was a personality type and that documenting every single moment of their existence was somehow a public service. There was Sophia, the loud one. And I don't mean loud like speaks up in meetings loud. I mean loud like has never had an inside thought in her entire life. Loud. The kind of person who laughs at maximum volume regardless of whether something is actually funny. Who tells stories that require her to stand up and act out all the parts. Who treats every conversation like she's performing for an invisible audience that's definitely going to give her a standing ovation. She had opinions about everything. Your outfit, your drink choice, your zodiac sign, your childhood trauma, and she shared them with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believed the world was waiting for her take on literally anything. Then there was Luke, the wannabe DJ. Luke owned 3 different MIDI controllers, had a SoundCloud with 47 followers, mostly bots, and introduced himself at parties by saying, "Yeah, I'm kind of a music producer," with the confidence of someone who'd won a Grammy instead of someone who made beats in his mom's basement. He wore festival wristbands from events that happened 3 years ago, had strong opinions about the scene, and constantly tried to get everyone to listen to his new track, which always sounded exactly like his old track, but with different laser noises. And finally, there was Mia, the unofficial gossip channel. If TMZ was a person, it would be Mia, except TMZ probably has better fact-checking. This woman knew everything about everyone, and if she didn't know it, she'd make an educated guess and present it as confirmed intelligence. She spoke exclusively in dramatic whispers, even when sharing completely mundane information. "Did you hear?" she'd say, leaning in conspiratorially. "Jennifer from accounting is getting Thai food for lunch." Thai food, Mason, what do you think that means? I never knew what it meant. I don't think she knew what it meant, but she sure acted like it was Watergate-level scandal. When Talia told me these three were joining us in Bali, I should have faked a work emergency. I should have claimed sudden onset amnesia. I should have literally done anything other than say, sure. Sounds fun, like an idiot who'd never met these people before. The first 2 days weren't catastrophic. They were just a lot. Sophia shrieked at every sunset like she'd never seen one before. Luke tried to befriend the hotel DJ and kept saying things like, "Yeah, man. I could totally see myself playing a set out here." Mia found drama and everything. Apparently, the couple in room 304 was definitely having an affair because they ordered room service twice in one day, which I guess is suspicious if you're insane. But I played along. I smiled. I nodded. I took the group photos. I pretended that spending my vacation with 3 people who treated real life like a reality show was exactly what I'd signed up for. Marriage is about compromise, right? Talia wanted her friends there, so her friends were there. I could survive a week. I'd survived worse. Like that time, I went to her company retreat and had to do trust falls with her boss who smelled like pepper and regret. Then Zane entered the picture and suddenly my vacation became a front row seat to my own humiliation, directed by my wife and produced by her Greek chorus of enablers. Zane was the tour guide the resort assigned to our group. The first time I saw him, he was standing on the beach at sunrise doing yoga or tai chi or some kind of slow-motion interpretive dance with the ocean. The guy was shirtless, obviously, because I'm pretty sure he was contractually obligated to be shirtless at all times. He was tan in that way that suggested he'd never been indoors. Had tattoos that probably meant something deep in a language he didn't speak, and moved with the kind of easy confidence that comes from knowing you're exactly what every romance novel describes when they say chiseled. His hair was that perfectly messy style that takes either 0 effort or 2 hours and $75 worth of product. I genuinely couldn't tell which. He had one of those smiles that belonged in a teeth-whitening commercial. And he spoke with this Australian-adjacent accent that made everything sound like an adventure, even when he was explaining the buffet hours. "Hey everyone," he said, approaching our breakfast table like he was hosting a morning show. "I'm Zay. I'll be your guide for the week. We've got some amazing experiences lined up. Snorkeling, temple visits, a sunset cruise. Going to be legendary." Sophia practically vibrated out of her chair. "Oh my God. Hi, I'm Sophia. This is Mia. That's Luke. And that's Talia and Mason." I got a casual head nod. Everyone else got the full wattage smile. "Beautiful," Zane said. And I swear he was looking at Talia when he said it. "Love the energy already. This is going to be a great week." That's when I should have known. That's when the universe was sending me a clear signal that said, "Mason, buddy, maybe fake that work emergency now before this gets worse." But no, I sat there drinking my coffee, thinking everything would be fine. It was not fine. Over the next few days, I watched my wife transform into a version of herself I'd never seen before. Or maybe I had seen it, and I'd just been too dumb to notice. Every time Zane was around, which was constantly, because he was literally our tour guide, Talia became someone else. Someone whose volume increased by 40%. Whose laugh became this weird giggle I'd never heard in 3 years of marriage, and whose entire body language changed like she'd been replaced by an alien who'd studied human flirting from a WikiHow article. At the temple tour, Zane explained the history of some ancient statue. Talia stood next to him, nodding like she was absorbing groundbreaking information, touching his arm every time she asked a question. "Oh my God, that's so interesting. Tell me more about the architecture thing you just said." During the snorkeling trip, she needed help putting on her fins. Zane obliged, kneeling in front of her like he was proposing while she giggled and said, "I'm so bad at this stuff." Even though I'd literally watched her put on fins by herself on our honeymoon at dinner, she somehow always ended up sitting next to him asking about his life, his travels, his philosophies on being present. Meanwhile, I sat at the other end of the table with Luke, who was explaining his vision for a dubstep remix of traditional Balinese music that absolutely nobody asked about. Sophia and Mia, bless their enabling hearts, acted like this was all completely normal. They'd giggle along, make comments about how cute Zane was, and occasionally glance at me like I was a science experiment they were monitoring for interesting reactions. The worst part, Talia wasn't even subtle about it. She wasn't sneaking around or being secretive. She was flirting openly publicly with an enthusiasm that suggested she'd forgotten I existed, or worse, that she remembered I existed and didn't care. I sat there during these interactions like a Wi-Fi router. Technically essential for everything to function, but completely invisible and taken for granted. Nobody acknowledged me. Nobody included me. I was just there existing in the background watching my wife perform for a guy whose job was literally to be nice to tourists. And here's the kicker. When I tried to participate, tried to join conversations or suggest activities, Talia would brush me off with a Mason. We're just having fun. Don't be boring. Or can you go get me another drink? I became the errand boy in my own vacation, fetching cocktails and taking photos while my wife and her friends treated Zane like he was the second coming of Crisworth. By day 4, I was seriously considering just booking myself a separate hotel room and calling it a solo retreat. At least then I could stop pretending I was enjoying watching my wife laugh, toss her hair, and touch another man's bicep while explaining how strong he must be from all that paddle boarding. Yeah, I really wished I'd booked a solo vacation. Or better yet, no vacation at all. You know what nobody tells you about reaching your breaking point? It's not dramatic. There's no explosion, no throwing things, no big confrontation where you deliver a monologue that makes everyone realize they've wronged you. That's movie stuff. Real breaking points are quiet. They're the moment you're sitting on a beach watching your wife publicly humiliate you. And instead of feeling angry, you just feel done. Done like a steak that's been on the grill too long. Done like a phone call you've been trying to end for 20 minutes. Done like a person who's finally realized that some problems can't be fixed with communication or compromise or couples therapy led by someone named Drive Sunshine who keeps talking about finding your shared truth. After the sunscreen incident, I sat on that beach for another hour. I didn't storm off. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there, finished my beer, and watched the waves do their thing while my brain processed what had just happened and what I was going to do about it. Talia and her crew had moved on to playing volleyball with Zane and some other tourists, shrieking and laughing like they were filming a commercial for tequila or poor life choices. Sophia kept yelling, "Get it, girl." Every time Talia made contact with the ball, Mia was taking photos from every angle like she was documenting a National Geographic special. Luke was trying to explain the physics of the perfect serve to anyone who'd listen. And Zane was just being Zane, effortlessly athletic, probably thinking about protein shakes and his next shirtless Instagram post. I watched all of this from my lounger. And I felt nothing. Not jealousy, not anger, not even disappointment, just this weird calm clarity that felt like someone had finally turned off a noise I'd been hearing for so long I'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be there. That's when I stood up, grabbed my towel, and walked back to the hotel. Our room was on the 4th floor with a view of the ocean that Talia had insisted was essential for the aesthetic. It cost an extra $200 a night for that view. Worth it, apparently, for the 3 photos she'd taken from the balcony before never looking at it again. I stood in the doorway for a second, looking at the mess. Her stuff was everywhere. Makeup scattered across the bathroom counter like a Sephora had exploded. Clothes draped over every available surface. Charging cables tangled in ways that defied physics. My stuff was neatly packed in one corner because I was apparently the only person in this marriage who understood that hotel rooms aren't storage units. Then I grabbed my suitcase and started packing. Not angry packing, not throwing things around packing. Calm, methodical, almost meditative packing. I folded each shirt like I was preparing for emotional war. Creases lined up perfectly. Colors organized, pants folded in thirds, socks paired and rolled. My toiletries went into their designated bag. Nothing forgotten, nothing left behind. There's something powerful about packing quietly. It's a level of cold that yelling can never achieve. Yelling is hot anger. It burns fast and people can dismiss it as you losing control or being dramatic. But quiet packing, that's calculated. That's a decision. That's the sound of someone who's thought it through and isn't changing their mind. I zipped up my suitcase and pulled out my phone. American Airlines had a flight leaving Bali at 11 tomorrow morning. It had a layover in Tokyo and another in Los Angeles, which meant I'd be traveling for approximately 1,000 years, but I didn't care. I booked it business class because screw it. I was already having a terrible week and I might as well have leg room while processing my marital breakdown. Confirmation email received. Boarding pass downloaded. Hotel checkout scheduled for 9 a.m. My phone buzz. A text from Talia. "Where'd you go?" "We're getting drinks at the beach bar." I stared at that message for a solid minute. She didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't apologize for the sunscreen thing. Didn't even acknowledge that maybe possibly she'd crossed a line. Just wanted to know where I was so I could presumably rejoin the audience for her performance. I typed back. "Heading to bed early. Have fun." Polite, neutral, giving away absolutely nothing. Okay, lol. Don't be boring. Don't be boring. Right? Because the real problem here was that I wasn't entertaining enough while watching my wife flirt with the tour guide. I looked around the room one more time, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. Then I grabbed my suitcase and walked down to the front desk. The receptionist was a young guy named AITA, who'd checked us in 4 days ago. He'd complimented Talia's dress, asked about our plans, and seemed genuinely excited that we were there to celebrate our anniversary. Now, he looked at me standing there with a packed suitcase at 7 p.m., and I could see him trying to figure out if he should ask questions or just process whatever I needed. I need to check out tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I said. Just me. My wife is staying for the rest of the week. He nodded slowly, typing something into his computer. Of course, Mr. Hartley. I'll prepare your bill. Will you need transportation to the airport? Yes, please. Flight leaves at 11 o'clock. More typing. All set. Is there anything else I can help you with? I almost laughed. What could he possibly help me with? Did they have a service for your wife humiliated you in public and you're fleeing the country? Was there a spa treatment for that? No, that's it. Thanks. I went back upstairs and sat on the balcony with a beer from the mini bar that cost $12 and tasted like regret. The ocean looked the same as it had this morning. Beautiful, peaceful, completely indifferent to human drama. The sun was setting, painting everything in those golden hour colors that Instagram influencers lose their minds over. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Talia. Zane's taking us to this amazing restaurant. You should come. I sipped my $12 beer and didn't respond. An hour later, hello. You're being weird. Still didn't respond. Another hour. Fine, be childish. We're having fun without you anyway. I turned off my phone. Here's what I learned about arguments over 3 years of marriage. The person who talks more loses. The person who gets emotional loses. The person who tries to explain their feelings loses because the other person will twist it, gaslight it, make you feel crazy for caring. They'll tell you you're overreacting, being sensitive, can't take a joke. But silence is undefeatable. You can't argue with silence. You can't gaslight nothing. You can't make someone feel crazy for saying absolutely nothing at all. Around 11 o'clock, I heard voices in the hallway. Talia and her friends, loud and definitely drunk, laughing about something that was probably only funny to people who'd had 6 cocktails. I heard her key card beep, the door open, then her footsteps stopping when she saw my packed suitcase by the door. Mason. She sounded confused, not concerned. Why is your stuff packed? I was lying in bed, eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. Method acting at its finest. Mason louder now with an edge of annoyance. Are you seriously asleep at 11 o'clock? We just got back. I didn't move. Didn't respond. Just kept breathing slowly and evenly like I was the most peacefully sleeping person in the history of sleep. I heard her huff, mumble something about me being no fun, then stumble into the bathroom. The sink ran more stumbling. Then she climbed into bed and within 5 minutes she was snoring lightly, probably dreaming about her Instagram engagement or Zane's abs or whatever occupied the mind of someone who thought humiliating their spouse was peak comedy. I lay there for another hour, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling fan going in slow circles. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'd walk out of this hotel. I'd get in that car to the airport. I'd fly home. And the best part, she had no idea it was coming. Silence, I discovered, wasn't just golden. It was cheaper than therapy, more effective than yelling, and way more satisfying than any argument I could have possibly won. My alarm went off at 7:30 a.m., which in Bali vacation time is basically the middle of the night. Talia was still passed out next to me, one arm flung over her face, mouth slightly open, looking like she'd gone 10 rounds with a bottle of coconut rum and lost, which based on the smell coming from her side of the bed, wasn't far from the truth. I got up quietly, showered, dressed, and did one final check of the room to make sure I hadn't left anything behind. Wallet, passport, phone, chargers, dignity, all accounted for. Well, most of my dignity. Some of it was probably still on that beach, buried in the sand next to my patience and will to continue this marriage. Talia didn't move. The woman could sleep through a natural disaster, which was convenient because she was about to wake up to a personal one. I grabbed my suitcase, took one last look at her sleeping peacefully without a care in the world, and left. Didn't leave a note. Didn't wake her up to say goodbye. Just closed the door behind me with a soft click that felt like the period at the end of a very long, very exhausting sentence. Audi was at the front desk again, looking significantly more awake than anyone had a right to be at this hour. He smiled when he saw me. That professional hospitality smile that probably hit 1,000 stories about terrible tourists and weird requests. Good morning, Mr. Hartley. Your car is waiting outside. I have your bill here. He slid the paper across the counter and I glanced at it. 4 nights, ocean view room, mini bar charges, room service, spa services that I definitely didn't use, but Talia definitely did. The total made my eye twitch slightly, but whatever. I handed him my credit card. Actually, I said as he was processing the payment. My wife is staying for the rest of the week. Could you please remove my card from the room and just leave hers on file? Something flickered in his eyes. Understanding maybe or recognition of a situation he'd definitely seen before. Of course, sir. I'll make that change right away. He processed my checkout, removed my card from their system, and confirmed that only Talia's card would be charged for the remaining nights and any additional expenses. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you for staying with us, Audi said, handing me my receipt. I hope you had a pleasant visit. I almost laughed. Pleasant wasn't the word I'd use, but it was definitely memorable. Yeah, I said. Educational for sure. The car ride to the airport was peaceful. Just me, my suitcase, and a driver who didn't feel the need to fill the silence with small talk. We drove through the early morning streets of Bali, past temples and rice paddies, and locals starting their day. And I felt this weird sense of lightness, like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to not be weighed down. Security was easy. The flight was on time. I boarded, found my business class seat, accepted the pre-flight champagne like I was celebrating something, which in a way I was, and settled in for the longest travel day of my life. That's when my phone started going off. I turned it back on after boarding and immediately the notifications started rolling in like a tsunami of regret and confusion. Text after text, call after call. Voicemails piling up, all from Talia. The first few texts were from around 9:30 a.m., right about when she probably woke up and realized I wasn't in the room. Where are you, Mason? Seriously, where did you go? Your stuff is gone. Are you kidding me right now? Then came the calls. 7 missed calls in the span of 15 minutes. I didn't answer any of them. Just watched them pop up on my screen like a very angry game of whack-a-mole. Then the voicemail started and oh boy, those were entertaining. The first one was confused. Mason, what the hell? Where are you? Your suitcase is gone. Did you leave? Call me back right now. The second one was angry. I cannot believe you would just leave without saying anything. This is so immature. You're seriously acting like a child right now. We need to talk about this. The third one was a masterpiece. Okay, I get it. You're mad about yesterday, but you're overreacting. It was just sunscreen. You told me to go home if I was jealous, and you actually left. Who does that? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I sat there in my business class seat, champagne in hand, listening to my wife tell me that I had embarrassed her. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife and serve it at a dinner party. But wait, it got better. Around 11 a.m. Bali time, right about when she probably went down to the lobby to look for me, the text changed tone dramatically. The hotel says, your card declined. Mason, they're saying, your card isn't on file anymore. My card isn't working either. Can you call them and fix this? Mason, this isn't funny. I had to put my phone down because I was laughing so hard that the flight attendant asked if I was okay. My card didn't decline. I removed it from the account entirely and her card wasn't working because, well, Talia had a spending problem and maxed out her credit card approximately every other month. I usually just paid it off because it was easier than dealing with the drama, but I guess she'd forgotten about that little detail. The next voicemail was pure panic. Mason, please. I'm at the front desk and they're saying I need to pay for the rest of the week up front and my card isn't going through and your card is gone and I don't understand what's happening. Can you please just call me back, please? Then came my personal favorite text message. I had to call my mom for money. Do you know how humiliating that was? Oh, I'm sorry. Was that humiliating? Having to ask for help in an uncomfortable situation in front of other people? Gee, that sounds terrible. I wouldn't know anything about that. It's not like I experienced anything humiliating recently. Certainly not yesterday on a beach in front of dozens of strangers. More texts flooded in throughout the day. Everyone is asking where you are. Sophia wants to know if you're coming back. Zane feels bad. He said he didn't mean to cause problems. Oh, Zane feels bad. How considerate. Maybe he could pay for her hotel room since he was so involved in our vacation. This is ridiculous. Mason, you're being so petty. At least respond. I didn't respond, not to the texts, not to the calls, not to the voicemails that kept coming in with increasing desperation. I just sat there in my comfortable business class seat, watching movies, eating airplane food that was somehow better than any meal I'd had in Bali and feeling more relaxed than I had in months. The flight attendant came by with more champagne. "Celebrating something?" she asked with a smile. "Yeah," I said. "Independence Day." She looked confused but refilled my glass anyway. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, I got a text from Sophia. "Dude, she's freaking out. She's crying." "What happened?" I almost responded. Almost. But then I remembered that Sophia was part of the problem. She'd laughed yesterday. She'd enabled it. She'd treated my humiliation like entertainment. Delete. Luke texted too. "Bro, she's crying at the front desk. Her card declined." This is harsh, man. Was it harsh? Or was it the natural consequence of telling your husband to go home if he didn't like watching you flirt with another man? I guess it depended on your perspective. Mia, always the gossip sent. OMG, what is happening? Talia won't tell us anything, but she's upset. Spill. Yeah, I wasn't spilling anything to someone who'd probably turn it into a group chat soap opera within 10 minutes. By the time we landed in Tokyo for the layover, I had 47 unread messages and 13 missed calls. I read through them while waiting for my connecting flight. Sipping terrible airport coffee that somehow tasted like victory. The most recent text from Talia was different from the others. Less angry, more desperate. "Please just tell me you're safe. I'm worried." Now she was worried. Not yesterday when she was making a fool of me in public. Not last night when she came back drunk and didn't even check if I was okay. But now when she needed something, suddenly she was concerned about my well-being. I finished my coffee and boarded the next flight. Still didn't respond. Because here's the thing about silence that I was really starting to appreciate. Every hour I didn't respond was another hour she had to sit with what she'd done. Every ignored call was a reminder that actions have consequences. Every unanswered text was a moment of reflection she couldn't avoid. I wasn't being cruel. I was just following instructions. She told me to go home. So, I went home. The beautiful thing about group chats is that nobody can keep a secret ever. It's like trying to contain water with a calendar. Theoretically possible if you're delusional, but in reality, everything's leaking everywhere and making a mess. I landed in Los Angeles around 6 p.m. Pacific time, which meant it was sometime tomorrow in Bali. Honestly, I'd lost track of time zones and stopped caring. My body felt like it had been folded into a suitcase and thrown down a flight of stairs. But my spirit was doing great, thriving even. I grabbed an Uber home, tipped the driver extra because he didn't try to make conversation, and walked into my apartment that I'd left 5 days ago thinking I was going on a romantic anniversary trip. The place looked exactly the same, clean, quiet, peaceful, and completely devoid of Talia's chaos. It was perfect. I dropped my suitcase, ordered a pizza, and was about to take the longest shower of my life when my phone buzzed with a notification that made me pause. It was a screenshot from a number I didn't recognize, but the content was gold. Someone had sent me a screenshot of what appeared to be Talia's friend group chat, the one they'd named Bali Babes Palm Tree Sparkles because apparently every group chat needs an emoji and zero self-awareness. The messages were from earlier today and they were spectacular. Sophia, guys, where is Mason? Talia won't tell us anything. Mia, I saw him leave this morning with his suitcase eyes. Luke, wait. What? Sophia, he left. Left. Mia, girl, yes. I was coming back from my run and saw him getting into a car. Airport car. Luke, bro, that's crazy. Over sunscreen. Sophia. Okay, but maybe we should have said something yesterday. Mia said what? That Talia was being extra. Sophia, yeah, kind of. Luke, she literally told him to go home if he was jealous. Mia. And he did skull. Sophia, this is bad, you guys. Luke. Talia is at the front desk freaking out. Says her card declined and his card is mysteriously not on file anymore. Mia, stop. Loudly crying face. Sophia, that's actually savage. Luke, bro, I feel kind of bad now. Mia, you feel bad? Imagine being Mason watching your wife flirt with the tour guide for 3 days straight. Sophia. Okay, Mia, don't act like you weren't encouraging it. Mia, I was not. Luke, you literally took a video of them playing volleyball and said, this is giving rom-com energy. Mia, that's different. Sophia, is it though? I sat there on my couch, pizza forgotten, reading this screenshot like it was the morning paper. They were turning on each other. The group chat was eating itself alive. This was better than any reality show I could have paid for. But it got better. A few minutes later, another screenshot came through. Different number, same group chat. Later in the conversation, Talia, I can't believe he actually left. Sophia, babe, are you okay? Talia, no, I'm not okay. He humiliated me, Luke. He humiliated you, Talia. Yes. Everyone saw him leave. Everyone's asking questions. It's embarrassing. Mia, didn't you tell him to leave, though, Talia? That's not the point. Mia, I think that might actually be exactly the point. Talia, whose side are you on? Mia, I'm just saying maybe you pushed it a little far with saying, Talia, I was being friendly. Luke Tal, you asked him to put sunscreen on your back in front of Mason. Talia, so what? It was just sunscreen, Sophia. And then you told Mason to go home if he didn't like it, Talia. I didn't think he'd actually do it. Luke, well, he did. Talia, you guys are supposed to be my friends. Mia, we are your friends. That's why we're telling you this is kind of on you. Talia, I can't believe this. Talia, I need to fix this. Oh, boy. She needed to fix this. I could only imagine what fixing this looked like in Talia's world. I found out about 30 minutes later when my phone exploded with Instagram notifications. Talia had posted. Of course, she had, because when you're in the middle of a personal crisis, the logical thing to do is definitely to post a thirst trap on social media and hope the validation from strangers will somehow repair your imploding marriage. The photo was from yesterday, a beach selfie she must have taken right after the sunscreen incident. She was wearing her white bikini, hair perfectly tousled by the wind, sunglasses pushed up on her head, giving the camera that sultry look that probably took 47 attempts to get right. The ocean sparkled behind her. The lighting was perfect. She looked objectively amazing. The caption though, oh man, the caption, some people can't handle strong women. Sparkles flexed biceps, living my best life and not apologizing for it. If you can't keep up, that's a you problem. Palm tree sun hashtag boss babe hash no apologies hash strong women hash living my truth hashtag Bailevi vibes. I stared at my phone, genuinely impressed by the audacity. She'd really looked at the situation. The situation where she publicly humiliated her husband and then got mad when he left and decided the narrative was, I'm too strong and he's too weak. Incredible. Truly incredible. I grabbed my pizza and settled in to watch what happened next because I knew what was coming. Talia had overestimated her followers' tolerance for delusion. The comments started rolling in and they were not what she expected. At Jessica_23. Girl, this is about your husband leaving Bali, isn't it? At Brooklyn Baker, strong women don't humiliate their partners in public. Radar to travel with Tom. Maybe your husband couldn't keep up with you disrespecting a man. Shrugging at Sarah Fit. This ain't it, sis. At Marcus Reeds, strong women lift people up, not tear them down. At Coffee and Chaos, the red flags are coming from inside the house. At Alexa Place POV, you're learning consequences exist. At Mindful Megan, imagine your husband leaves you on vacation and your first thought is to post a thirst trap skull. I was watching in real time as the internet did what the internet does best. Hold people accountable in the most brutally honest way possible. Comment after comment called her out. Not in a mean way, but in a hey, maybe you should look in the mirror way. Someone had clearly spilled the tea about what actually happened because the comments got more specific. At Vanessa Vlogs. Did you really tell your husband to go home if he was jealous and then get surprised when he went home? At Dan the Man Dan, ma'am, you asked the tour guide to put sunscreen on you in front of your husband. That's not strong woman energy. That's just disrespectful. At Linda Loves Books. Strong women don't humiliate their husbands in public and then play victim when there are consequences. That last comment got over 200 likes in the first 10 minutes. Talia started responding to comments, which was her first mistake. Never respond to comments when you're wrong. It's like digging a hole and then asking for a bigger shovel. Talia, at Brooklyn Baker, you don't know the full story. At Brooklyn Baker, then tell us. Why did your husband leave? Talia, he was being insecure and jealous. At Brooklyn Baker over what? And then Talia made her second mistake. She told them, Talia, I asked our tour guide to put sunscreen on my back and he freaked out. The comments exploded at MikeyMike_87. You asked another man to put sunscreen on you when your husband was right there and you're confused why he left. Face with tears of joy at Read with Rachel. Girl, I'm a feminist and even I know that's out of pocket. At Fitness Fiona, my husband would have left me too and I wouldn't have blamed him. At Tech with Terry, the mental gymnastics to make yourself the victim here is Olympic level. I was eating my pizza, scrolling through the comments, feeling like I was watching the most satisfying episode of a reality show ever made. The internet court was in session, and Talia was losing badly. More screenshots started coming through from anonymous numbers. Clearly, her friends were documenting everything and people were sharing it around. The group chat was still going. Luke, tell maybe delete the post. Talia, why? I didn't do anything wrong. Mia, the comments are not it. Babe, Talia, they don't understand. Sophia, I think they understand perfectly and that's the problem. 10 minutes later, the post was gone, deleted, vanished into the digital void like it never existed. But the internet never forgets. Screenshots of the post and the comments were already circulating. Someone had screen recorded her responding to comments. It was out there, permanent, a digital monument to the consequences of her actions. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. Chef's kiss. I didn't know who was sending me these screenshots, but I appreciated their service to journalism. I finished my pizza, took that shower, and went to bed in my own apartment, in my own bed, in complete peace and quiet. Meanwhile, somewhere in Bali, Talia was probably staring at her phone, realizing that the internet had just held up a mirror, and she didn't like what she saw. 3 days after I got back home, I was living my best divorced, but not officially divorced yet life. I deep cleaned the apartment, meal prepped for the week like I was training for a bodybuilding competition, and had started rewatching The Sopranos from the beginning because apparently my subconscious thought what I needed was more stories about toxic relationships and people making terrible decisions. I was on episode 4 enjoying my homemade stir fry and the fact that nobody was asking me to take photos of their food before they ate it when my phone rang. Unknown number. Now, normally I don't answer unknown numbers because I'm not a psychopath. Unknown numbers are either scammers trying to tell me my car's extended warranty is expiring, I drive a 10-year-old Honda, buddy, that ship has sailed, or robots asking if I want to lower my student loan payments. But something told me this one was going to be entertaining. I answered, hello. Silence for a second. Then that voice I'd been married to for 3 years, now sounding small and shaky in a way I'd never heard before. Mason, Talia. Of course, it was Talia. Who else would call from an unknown number after I'd ignored 47 texts and 13 calls from her actual phone? The woman was nothing if not persistent in her quest to make everything about her. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice neutral, not cold, not warm, just flat like a pancake that had been left on the griddle too long. You really left me there, she said. And I could hear that tremor in her voice that usually preceded tears. The same tremor she used when she wanted something or was trying to manipulate a situation in her favor. I'd heard it before when she wanted to buy a purse that cost more than our monthly groceries or when she needed me to cancel plans with my friends so she could have a crisis that somehow always required my immediate attention. Yeah, I said again. Why waste words? She knew what happened. She was there. I can't believe you, she said, and now the tears were definitely coming. I could hear that shift in her breathing, that little hitch that meant the waterworks were about to start. You just left without saying anything. Without even talking to me, I took a bite of my stir fry, chewed, swallowed. Tony Soprano was in the middle of a therapy session on my TV talking about his mother issues. Felt relevant. What did you want me to say? I asked, genuinely curious. You told me to go home if I was jealous. I went home. Seemed pretty straightforward. I didn't think you'd actually do it. Her voice went up an octave. That familiar tone of someone who's just realized their bluff got called and they're holding a terrible hand. It was a joke, Mason. You know how I am. I was just being dramatic. Yes, the classic, it was just a joke defense. The refuge of people who say hurtful things and then act shocked when there are consequences. I'd heard this one before, too. Usually after she'd made some comment about my job not being as exciting as her marketing career or about how I dressed like a dad even though I was 32. And that's not even that old. Cool, I said. Well, I took you seriously. My bad. You're bad. She was getting angry now. The tears evaporating into rage like water on hot pavement. You embarrassed me, Mason. Everyone saw you leave. Everyone was asking questions. Do you know how humiliating that was? I had to put my fork down for this one. Had to really appreciate the absolute audacity of what I just heard. Let me get this straight, I said slowly, like I was explaining algebra to a golden retriever. You're upset that I embarrassed you. Yes. By leaving after you publicly told me to leave. That's not you're twisting it. I'm really not. I said you said and I quote, if you're jealous, go home. Then you got mad when I went home. I'm trying to understand the logic here, but it's not clicking. You know what I meant? Do I? Because it seems like you said exactly what you meant. You wanted me gone so you could keep flirting with Zane without your boring husband watching. So, I left. Problem solved. She made this sound that was half gasp, half sob, like I just revealed some devastating truth she wasn't ready to face. Which, to be fair, I probably had. I wasn't flirting, she insisted, but even she didn't sound convinced. I was being friendly. There's a difference, right? I said, just like there's a difference between asking your husband to put sunscreen on your back and asking the shirtless tour guide to do it instead. Super friendly. Very normal behavior. Oh my God, you're still on that? It was sunscreen, Talia, I said. And I kept my voice calm because I'd learned that staying calm drove her crazy way more than yelling ever could. If it was just about sunscreen, you would have asked me. I was sitting 2 feet away from you. But you didn't want me to do it. You wanted Zane to do it. And you wanted to make sure I saw it and knew that you didn't need me or care what I thought about it. Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that meant I'd hit the target dead center and she was scrambling for a comeback. You're being ridiculous, she finally said, but there was no conviction behind it. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe I'm just tired of being treated like a prop in your one-woman show. That's not fair. You told me to go home in front of a beach full of people because I raised an eyebrow. One eyebrow, Talia. That's all I did. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just looked surprised that my wife was having another man rub lotion on her back and you responded by humiliating me publicly. So yeah, I went home and somehow I'm the villain here. More silence then. Quieter now. I had to call my mom for money. Ah, there it was. The real reason for this call. Not an apology, not reflection on her actions, not, hey, maybe I treated you like garbage and I should think about why my husband would rather fly 20 hours home than spend another day watching me disrespect him. No, she was mad about the money. I'm aware, I said. You texted me about it several times. Do you know how humiliating that was? She asked, and I almost laughed. Almost. Do I know how humiliating it is to need help in an uncomfortable situation in front of other people? I repeated slowly. Gee, Talia, I wonder what that's like. If only I had some recent experience with public humiliation that I could relate to. That's different. How? Because I actually needed help. You were just being petty. And there it was. The fundamental disconnect in her mind. Her needs were always valid and mine were always petty. Her feelings were always justified and mine were always overreactions. She was the main character and I was just supposed to read my lines and be grateful for the role. I followed your instructions, I said simply. You told me what to do if I was jealous. I did it. That's not petty. That's just listening. You could have just talked to me like an adult instead of running away. I tried talking to you for 3 years, I said, and I was surprised by how tired I sounded. Not angry, just exhausted. Every time you crossed a line, I talked to you. Every time you made me feel small, I talked to you. Every time you chose getting attention from other men over respecting me, I talked to you. And every single time you told me I was being insecure, jealous, or controlling. So, I stopped talking and I started listening instead. Listening to what? To what you were actually telling me. Not your words, but your actions. And your actions told me pretty clearly that you didn't respect me, didn't value me, and didn't think my feelings mattered. So, I left. She was crying for real now. Those big gulping sobs that might have worked on me a year ago, but I'd spent 3 days in peace and quiet, sleeping in my own bed, eating food I actually wanted to eat, watching TV shows I wanted to watch, and not once having to worry about being someone's emotional support audience. And I'd realized something important. I was happier alone than I'd been in years of being with her. Mason, please. She said through the tears. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can work on it. I'll be better. I promise. You said that before. I reminded her. After your company Christmas party when you spent 2 hours flirting with your boss while I stood in a corner holding your purse. After your friend's wedding when you dirty danced with the best man and told me to loosen up when I said something. After that concert where you gave your number to the bartender as a joke. Every time you promised you'd be better and every time nothing changed. This time will be different. Yeah, I said quietly. You're right. This time is different because this time I'm done. The line went quiet except for her breathing and the occasional sniffle. So that's it? She finally asked. You're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I said I'm just choosing myself for once. You told me what you wanted. You wanted me to go home. I listened. For the first time in our marriage, I actually listened to what you said instead of trying to decode what you meant or make excuses for your behavior. I didn't mean it, she whispered. That's the problem, Talia. You never mean it. You never mean to hurt me. You never mean to embarrass me. You never mean to disrespect me. But you keep doing it anyway. And I'm tired of being married to someone who keeps accidentally treating me like I'm invisible. Please don't do this. You already did it, I said simply. I'm just accepting it. I hung up then. Didn't wait for her response. Didn't give her a chance to make more promises or shed more tears or try to guilt me into giving her another chance. I just hung up and went back to my stir-fry and Tony Soprano. And I felt lighter than I had in years. After that phone call, something weird happened. Or rather, something weird didn't happen. I didn't block Talia's number. I didn't delete her contact. I didn't go through her Instagram like some kind of digital archaeologist looking for evidence of her latest crisis or public meltdown. I didn't even hate her, which was probably the most surprising part of all. I just unplugged. It was like someone had finally found the off switch to a machine that had been running nonstop for 3 years, making this constant humming noise that I'd gotten so used to, I'd forgotten what quiet sounded like. And now that it was off, man, the silence was deafening in the best possible way. My buddy Chris called me on day 4 of my newly peaceful existence. Chris was my college roommate, the guy who'd been best man at my wedding, even though he'd had some serious reservations about Talia that he'd kept mostly to himself because that's what good friends do. They let you make your own mistakes and then help you clean up the mess after without saying I told you so more than 3 or 4 times. Dude, he said when I answered, I saw Talia's Instagram story. I was at the gym actually working out for the first time in months instead of just paying for a membership I never used. Felt good, felt productive, felt like I was investing in myself instead of managing someone else's emotional stock portfolio. Yeah, I said, not really caring, but curious what new chapter of the Talia drama saga had unfolded. She posted this whole thing about knowing your worth and not letting toxic people dim your light with like a sunset photo and some quote that looked like it came from a Pinterest board for people going through breakups. I laughed, almost dropping my dumbbell. Let me guess, she's the one with worth and I'm the toxic person. I mean, she didn't say it explicitly, but the implication was pretty clear. Comments are a war zone, though. Her followers are not buying it. Good for them, I said, and I meant it. Not in a vindictive way. But in a I'm glad people can see through the performance way. You okay, man? Chris asked, and I could hear the genuine concern in his voice. Like, really okay? Because you sound I don't know. Too okay. I'm great, I said, and realized I actually meant it. I'm not spiraling, not stalking her social media, not writing angry texts at 2 a.m. that I'm too smart to actually send. I'm just done. And it feels amazing. Huh? Chris said like he was processing this. That's very mature of you, right? I'm as surprised as you are. The thing was, I really wasn't kidding. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up with this low-level anxiety about what drama the day would bring. Would Talia be upset about something I said? Would she post something that would embarrass me? Would I have to defend her behavior to my friends and family again? Would I spend another evening being her personal photographer while she tried on 17 outfits for a dinner we were already late to? None of that existed anymore. My mornings were mine. My evenings were mine. My mental energy was mine. It was like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Work got better, too, which was unexpected. I'm an accountant. Not the most exciting job in the world, but it's stable, pays well, and I'm good at it. Talia used to make comments about how boring my job was, how she could never sit at a desk all day doing math stuff, how her marketing career was so much more creative and dynamic. I'd internalized that for a while. Felt kind of apologetic about having a normal job that didn't involve influencer events or brand partnerships or whatever the hell she did that required that many selfies. But now I showed up, did my work, helped my coworkers with their tax questions, and left feeling competent and useful. My boss, Patricia, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been doing this for 30 years, stopped by my desk one afternoon with her coffee mug that said, "I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right." "Mason," she said, peering at me over her glasses. "You seem different lately." "Different how?" I asked, hoping this wasn't leading to a conversation about my productivity or something. "Lighter," she said, less stressed. "Did you finally tell that wife of yours to knock it off with the surprise lunch visits?" Talia used to show up at my office unannounced, which sounds romantic until you realize she only did it when she wanted something or needed me to solve a problem she'd created. Patricia had witnessed more than one of these surprise visits that ended with me having to leave early or skip lunch to deal with whatever crisis Talia had manufactured. "We're separated," I said simply. "I left her in Bali and came home." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. Then slowly, she smiled. "Good for you." "Yeah, Mason, I've been married for 32 years. I know what a healthy relationship looks like, and whatever you had going on was not it. You've been walking around here for months looking like a man who's constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's nice to see you relaxed." That conversation stuck with me. Other people had noticed. My stress had been so visible that my boss, who barely knew me outside of quarterly reviews and the occasional conversation about Excel formulas, had picked up on it. My mom called on day 6. I'd been avoiding telling her about the separation because my mom loved Talia. Or rather, my mom loved the idea of me being married and potentially giving her grandchildren. And Talia knew how to perform for parents. She'd show up to family dinners with homemade desserts, store-bought, but she'd transfer them to a nice dish, compliment my mom's cooking, ask about my dad's golf game. She was great at the 2-hour performance. It was the other 8,758 hours of the year that were the problem. "Honey," my mom said in that tone that meant she'd heard something from someone and was fishing for confirmation. Debbie Henderson told me she saw Talia's Instagram post about toxic people. "Is everything okay?" Debbie Henderson was my mom's friend from book club who apparently followed Talia on social media for reasons I'd never understood. We separated. "Mom," I said, ripping off the band-aid. "I left her in Bali and came home. We're probably getting divorced." Silence. "Then what happened?" I gave her the abbreviated version, the sunscreen, the public humiliation, the go home if you're jealous comment. My decision to actually go home. More silence. Then my mom said something that genuinely shocked me. Good. Mason, I'm your mother. I love you, and I've been watching you shrink yourself for 3 years to make room for that girl's ego. You stopped coming to family dinners. You stopped calling. Every time we talked, you sounded exhausted. I thought marriage was supposed to make you happy, not turn you into someone I barely recognized. You never said anything," I said quietly. "Because you seemed committed to making it work. And I respect that. But sweetie, there's a difference between working on a marriage and working yourself to death trying to fix someone who doesn't think they're broken. I'm glad you finally chose yourself." I didn't expect to get choked up, but I did. Hearing my mom, who'd been married to my dad for 37 years and took the for better or worse thing seriously, tell me she was proud of me for leaving felt like permission I didn't know I needed. My dad got on the phone after. "Your mother's crying happy tears, by the way. She's very proud. Also, I never liked Talia. She ate all the good cookies at Christmas and didn't say thank you." Classic dad. Cutting right to what mattered. The days turned into a week, then 2 weeks. Talia kept trying different numbers, probably using her friends' phones or those free texting apps. I'd see the messages pop up, read them without opening them. "Thank you, preview function," and then just move on with my day. "We need to talk about us. I've been thinking about what you said. Can we at least discuss this like adults? I deserve a conversation." That last one almost made me respond. Almost. Because the audacity of thinking she deserved a conversation after 3 years of not listening to anything I said was truly something. But I didn't take the bait. Every time I felt tempted, I'd remember the beach, the sunscreen, the laughter from strangers, the way she'd smiled like my pain was entertainment. And I'd put my phone down and go do literally anything else. I started cooking actual meals instead of eating takeout every night. Tried new recipes, burned some things, made some things that were actually good. Didn't have to photograph any of it or wait while someone found the perfect angle and lighting. I read books, finished a whole novel in 3 days without interruption. I went to a movie by myself on a Wednesday afternoon and it was glorious. Nobody asked me to explain the plot in real time or complain that they were bored. I called old friends I'd lost touch with because Talia thought they were boring or bad influences. Translation: they didn't worship her. I existed. Just existed without drama, without damage control, without pretending that disrespect was a joke I should learn to laugh at. Silence, I discovered, wasn't just the absence of noise. It was a luxury brand I couldn't afford when I was married. Now I was living in it, wrapped in it like the world's most comfortable blanket. And I had zero intention of giving it up. A month into my new life as a separated but not quite divorced man, I was at Common Grounds, this coffee shop near my apartment that specialized in overpriced lattes and providing laptops to people who wanted to look busy while actually scrolling through Twitter for 3 hours. I was one of those people, except I was actually working. End of quarter reports don't write themselves. Unfortunately, the place was pretty packed for a Thursday afternoon. Students pretending to study, freelancers pretending to work, and that one guy who was definitely writing a screenplay about his ex-girlfriend that nobody was ever going to read. I'd snagged a corner table by the window, had my laptop open, my coffee within reach, and was deep into a spreadsheet that was giving me a migraine when I heard it. Oh no. Oh no. 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 Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I looked up just in time to see a coffee cup. A large iced coffee. Extra ice. From the looks of the waterfall now cascading off my table, tumbling in slow motion like we were in some kind of romantic comedy directed by someone who hated electronics. The coffee hit my laptop keyboard with the enthusiasm of a toddler jumping into a pool. Brown liquid spread across the keys, seeping into the touchpad, probably frying circuits and destroying whatever chance I had of finishing this report before the weekend. Standing there looking absolutely horrified was a woman in her late 20s with curly brown hair that was escaping from a messy bun, glasses sliding down her nose, and an expression that suggested she just committed a federal crime instead of a caffeine-related accident. "I am so sorry," she said again, frantically grabbing napkins from the dispenser and trying to mop up the coffee tsunami. "I tripped over that guy's backpack and just am so sorry. Is your computer okay? Please tell me it's okay." "Oh God, it's not okay, is it?" I grabbed my laptop, flipped it upside down to let the coffee drain out, and tried to assess the damage. The screen was still on, which was either a good sign or the last hera before everything died. Keys were sticky. The touchpad wasn't responding. This was not great. It's not great, I admitted, because lying seemed pointless when coffee was literally dripping onto the floor. "I'll pay for it," she said immediately, still wielding napkins like they could somehow undo physics. "I'll pay for repairs or a new one or whatever you need. I'm so sorry. I'm Nora, by the way. Nora, the person who just destroyed your computer. That's going to be my epitaph. Here lies Nora. She murdered a laptop with iced coffee." Despite the situation, despite my quarterly report probably being corrupted beyond repair and my laptop likely being dead, I laughed. Actually laughed because there was something about her complete mortification, her willingness to immediately take responsibility and her apocalyptic self-deprecation that was kind of refreshing. "Mason," I said, extending my non-coffee covered hand. "Mason, the guy whose laptop just got baptized in caffeine." She shook it, still looking like she might cry. "This is literally the worst thing I've ever done." "Well, no. One time I accidentally replied all to a company email about how boring the CEO's presentation was, but this is a close second. That's pretty bad." I agreed, right? I had to change teams. It was a whole thing. She looked at my laptop again, which was still dripping coffee despite my best efforts. "Listen, there's a computer repair place 2 blocks from here. Can I at least walk with you and pay for whatever they say? It's the least I can do. Actually, it's literally the least I can do since I caused this disaster." I should have said no. I should have just gotten her number for insurance purposes and dealt with it myself. But there was something about her, something genuine and unperformed about her panic that made me say yes. "Sure," I said, packing up my soggy laptop and coffee-stained papers. "Lead the way to the computer hospital." The repair shop was called Tech Resurrection, which felt appropriate given the circumstances. The guy behind the counter name tag said Kyle Beard said I have opinions about Linux. Took one look at my laptop and grimaced. "Iced coffee," he asked. "Is it that obvious?" Said the smell gave it away, plus the coffee's still dripping out of it. Kyle opened the laptop, poked at some keys inside. "I can try to save it but no promises. Liquid damage is tricky. Could be $100. Could be you need a new laptop. Won't know until I open it up." "Do whatever you need to do," Nora said immediately, pulling out her wallet. "I'm paying. This is my fault." "It was an accident," I said, feeling kind of bad about how guilty she looked. "An accident I caused by not watching where I was walking because I was texting my sister about her cat's dietary issues, which, let's be honest, could have waited." Kyle looked between us, clearly entertained. "I'll call you in a few hours with an estimate. In the meantime, maybe avoid coffee shops." We left the shop and stood on the sidewalk in that awkward way people do when they're not sure if the interaction is over or just beginning. Nora was still clutching her wallet, still looking like she'd committed a war crime instead of spilling a beverage. "I really am sorry," she said for approximately the 15th time. "I know," I said. "You've been very clear about that. I just feel terrible. You were working and I just destroyed everything with my clumsiness." "And hey," I interrupted gently. "It's okay. Seriously, laptops can be fixed or replaced. It's not like you killed my dog." "Do you have a dog?" "No." "Good. Because I'd feel even worse if I had to worry about being a dog murderer on top of being a laptop murderer." I laughed again twice in 10 minutes. That had to be some kind of record for conversations that started with property damage. "Look," she said, taking a breath like she was about to make a decision. "Can I at least buy you a coffee? A new coffee from a different shop where I promised to keep both hands firmly on the cup at all times." I should have said no. I was technically still married, even if separated. Getting coffee with a woman who just destroyed my laptop seemed like a weird premise for anything. But there was something about Nora, something unpolished and real that made me want to say yes. Sure, I said. But maybe we skipped the iced drinks. We ended up at a different coffee shop 3 blocks away. A quieter place that looked like someone's grandmother had decorated it with lace doilies and inspirational quotes about friendship. Nora got a hot tea because I can't be trusted with cold beverages apparently. And I got a regular coffee. We sat at a table by the window and that's when I realized something strange. The silence wasn't awkward. With Talia, silence had always needed to be filled. She'd get anxious if nobody was talking, would start telling stories or showing me something on her phone or creating drama just to have something happening. But Nora, she just sipped her tea and looked comfortable existing without narrating every moment. So, she finally said, "What do you do when you're not having your laptop murdered by clumsy strangers?" "I'm an accountant," I said, waiting for the usual response. Some joke about how boring that must be or a comment about tax season or the glazed over look people get when you mention spreadsheets. "Oh, nice," she said instead. "My brother's an accountant, says it's actually pretty interesting once you get into it. Something about financial puzzles." I blinked. "Yeah, actually it's kind of like solving puzzles. Most people don't get that. Most people probably haven't spent 4 hours trying to balance a budget for a non-profit that keeps receipts in a shoebox. That was my last job. Nightmare." We talked for an hour. Just talked about work, about life, about her cat-obsessed sister and my dad who ranked cookies by thank you frequency. She didn't pull out her phone once. Didn't check her reflection in anything. Didn't perform. She just existed peacefully like a regular human having a regular conversation. When she laughed, it was because something was actually funny, not because she had an audience to impress. When she told stories, she included the embarrassing parts about herself instead of turning everything into a highlight reel. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers instead of waiting for her turn to talk. It felt strange at first. Calm is addictive once you taste it, but it's also kind of alarming when you're used to chaos. "I should probably go," she said eventually, checking her watch. "I have a thing tonight, but thank you for being so nice about the whole laptop massacre. Most people would have been way angrier. Most people probably haven't had worse things happen to them recently," I said without thinking. She looked at me curiously, but didn't pry, just smiled and said, "Well, Kay has my number for the repair bill, but if you want to, get coffee again sometime with me keeping my beverages far away from your electronics." "I'd like that." I realized I would like that, too. A lot actually. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." She left and I sat there for another few minutes finishing my coffee and thinking about how different that interaction had been from anything I'd experienced in the last 3 years. No drama, no performance, no competing for space in my own story. Just a conversation with someone who seemed content being herself instead of auditioning for a role. It was weird. It was peaceful and I wanted more of it. 3 weeks after the coffee shop incident, my laptop was fixed. $200. Nora insisted on paying every cent. I'd had 4 more coffee dates with Nora, all without beverage-related casualties, and I'd officially filed for divorce. That last one was surprisingly easy. Turned out that when you have a clear-cut case of spouse publicly humiliated me and told me to leave, so I left. The paperwork practically fills itself out. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca, who'd seen everything and was impressed by nothing, looked over the timeline of events and actually smiled. "This is the most straightforward case I've had all year. She literally told you to go home. You went home. She can't really argue with that." "She'll try," I said, because I knew Talia. She'd try to spin it, reframe it, make it about my jealousy or insecurity or inability to handle her free spirit. "Let her try," Rebecca said, closing the file. "We've got screenshots of her Instagram post, witness statements from other tourists, and the hotel records showing you removed yourself from the room charges while she was still there. Plus, her own text messages saying, 'Go home if you're jealous.' This is what we call an airtight case of getting exactly what you asked for." I left her office feeling lighter than I had in years. The divorce would take a few months to finalize. Bureaucracy moves slower than a DMV line on a Monday. But the hard part was done. I'd made the decision. I'd filed the papers. I was officially legally moving on. My phone buzzed while I was walking to my car. Text from an unknown number, which meant it was probably Talia using yet another friend's phone or app. She'd been doing that for weeks, trying different approaches like I'd be testing her way back into my life. But this time, it wasn't Talia. Unknown number. "Hey man, it's Luke. Got your number from the wedding list. Hope that's cool." Luke, the wannabe DJ from Bali. The one who'd sent me those group chat screenshots that I'd enjoyed way too much. Me, hey, what's up, Luke? Just wanted to let you know Talia is back home. Got back last week. Of course, she was. The vacation had to end eventually, and I'm sure staying in Bali after I left wasn't quite as fun when she had to face the fact that her actions had consequences and also pay for everything herself. Luke, she's been pretty quiet, says she learned her lesson. I stared at that text for a long moment. She learned her lesson. Like, this was some kind of educational experience where she'd taken notes and would do better on the next test. Like 3 years of disrespecting me had been a rough draft and now she was ready to submit the final version. Me, good for her. I hit send and then did something that felt weirdly powerful. I muted the conversation. Not blocked, just muted because blocking felt like I still cared enough to actively keep her out. But muting? Muting was just indifference. Luke, she wanted me to tell you she's sorry. Really sorry. Says she gets it now. I saw the message in my notifications but didn't open it. Didn't respond. Just pocketed my phone and got in my car. Here's the thing about revenge that nobody tells you. Most of the time you don't need it. Life has this beautiful way of handing people receipts for their behavior. Full price, no discount, all taxes included. I didn't need to plot anything. Didn't need to post anything. Didn't need to air out our dirty laundry or make her look bad. She'd done all of that herself. The internet had already held up a mirror. Her friends had already questioned her judgment. She'd already had to call her mom for money in a foreign country. Already had to explain to everyone why her husband left in the middle of their anniversary trip. Already had to face the fact that actions have consequences. And it's just a joke. Only works until someone takes you seriously. I didn't need revenge. She'd already gotten the bill. That night, I had dinner with Nora. Nothing fancy, just this Thai place near her apartment that she swore had the best pad Thai in the city. She was right. It was incredible. And also, I realized halfway through the meal that this was the first dinner I'd had in months where nobody had made me wait while they photographed the food from 17 angles. You're smiling, Nora said, twirling noodles around her fork. What's funny? Nothing, I said. Just I'm having a good time. Is that unusual? She asked, but not in a confrontational way. Just curious. It used to be, I admitted, my ex. Well, almost ex. The divorce is processing. She made everything complicated. Even dinner was a performance. Had to get the lighting right, the angle right, the caption right. By the time we actually ate, the food was cold, and I'd lost my appetite. Nora made a face. That sounds exhausting. It really was. Well, she said, raising her water glass like it was champagne. Here's to hot food and low expectations. I clinkied my glass against hers. I'll drink to that. We didn't have some big dramatic moment where I declared my feelings or she became my rebound or whatever movie script people think happens after a breakup. We just enjoyed each other's company, talked about normal things, made plans to see a movie next weekend, exchanged memes about accounting. Yes, accounting memes exist. And yes, they're hilarious if you're a specific type of nerd. It was simple. It was easy. It was peaceful. And peace, I discovered, was underrated. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment. My space decorated how I wanted it, organized in a way that made sense to me. And the first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not the heavy, anxious quiet of waiting for something bad to happen. Not the tense quiet of tiptoeing around someone's mood. Just quiet, peaceful, comfortable, quiet. I made my own coffee. Not some complicated order that required specific measurements and organic ingredients and a certain type of oat milk. Just coffee, black, simple, perfect. I opened the curtains and let the morning light in. Something Talia never liked because it wasn't flattering for morning selfies. The sun felt good, warm, real. I sat on my couch with my coffee and my book and thought about how different my life looked now compared to a month ago. How I wasn't walking on eggshells. Wasn't managing someone else's emotions. Wasn't pretending that disrespect was love or that public humiliation was just her being playful. My phone buzzed. Text from my mom. Mom, coming over for dinner Sunday. Your father is making his famous ribs. Also, Debbie Henderson told me Talia is back in town and devastated. I told Debbie that sounds like a personal problem. Was I rude? I laughed out loud. Me. Not rude. Accurate. I'll be there Sunday. Can I bring someone? Mom. The coffee shop girl. Me. Her name is Nora. Mom. Mom. Can't wait to meet Nora. Tell her your father will interrogate her about her cookie preferences. It's his love language. I smiled and put my phone down. Took another sip of coffee. Looked around my apartment. My space. My life. My peace. Talia had told me to go home if I was jealous. And yeah, maybe I did go home. I got on a plane, flew 20 hours and came back to my apartment. But somewhere between leaving Bali and filing for divorce and meeting Nora and reclaiming my own life, something shifted. This place, this quiet, peaceful, drama-free space stopped being just where I lived. It became home. Not because of the furniture or the location or the rent I paid every month, but because for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. I could exist without performance. I could just be myself without apologizing for taking up space or having feelings or expecting basic respect from the person I'd married. I'd spent 3 years being a supporting character in someone else's show. And I'd finally remembered that I was the main character in my own life. And the best part, my story was better without all that manufactured drama. Turns out peace isn't boring. It's just what happens when you stop accepting chaos as normal. My coffee was still hot. The sun was still shining. I had a book to read, a date with Nora this weekend, ribs with my parents on Sunday, and absolutely zero drama to manage. Talia could keep her apologies and her lessons learned and her devastation. I didn't need any of it. I didn't need closure or revenge or even acknowledgement that she'd been wrong. I just needed what I had right now. My coffee, my quiet, my peace. So yeah, maybe I did go home like she told me to. But for the first time in a long time, it actually felt like home. And I wasn't going anywhere. Story 2. I needed to drive my 82-year-old mom to the hospital. My car was in the shop. When I asked my wife for hers, she said, "Not my problem. Figure it out." I just replied, "Okay." The next day. She called me 31 times. She called me 31 times the next day. By the 15th call, her voice had shifted from irritation to panic. By the 23rd, it had turned into something I had never heard in nearly 3 decades of marriage fear. I watched her name light up my phone screen again and again while I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of black coffee growing cold in my hand. The strange thing is none of it would have happened if she had simply handed me her car keys. Instead, she looked at me that morning and said 5 words that still echo in my head, like a door slamming shut. "Not my problem. Figure it out." It was 6:40 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of my mother coughing in the guest room down the hall. It wasn't an ordinary cough. It was tight, strained, the kind that made you sit upright in bed without thinking. My mother is 82 years old, 2 stances, mild heart failure, a medication list longer than most restaurant menus. She's lived with us since my father passed 3 years ago. Most days, she moved slowly but steadily. That morning, she couldn't catch her breath. I helped her sit up. Her hands felt cold. Her skin had that pale gray tone I've learned not to ignore. "Let's not wait," she whispered. I already knew. I grabbed my phone to call her cardiologist's office. They told me to bring her in immediately. And that's when I remembered. My car was still in the shop. Transmission failure. 4th day waiting on parts. I had complained about it just the night before while Laura, my wife, barely looked up from her tablet. Laura's SUV sat in the driveway, practically brand new, fully paid off. I walked into the kitchen where she was scrolling through something on her phone, her coffee steaming beside her. "Laura," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Mom needs to get to the hospital. My car is still in the shop. Can I take yours?" She didn't look up right away, just swiped once more on the screen. "I have Pilates at 9 o'clock, she said flatly. "I'll have it back before then." That's when she looked at me and I saw it. Not anger, not stress, indifference. "Not my problem," she said, lifting her mug. "Figure it out." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. "My mom can't breathe." She shrugged. "Then call an Uber." I stood there longer than I care to admit, waiting for the punchline, waiting for the softness to return to her eyes. It didn't. So I nodded. "Okay," I said. That was it. No shouting, no arguing, just that one word. "Okay." Our neighbor Frank drove us to the hospital. The whole ride, I stared out the window while Mom rested her head back against the seat. "Was that Laura?" she asked quietly. I kept my eyes forward. "She has a busy morning," I replied. Mom didn't say anything else, but I felt the weight of her silence. At the hospital, the test began immediately. EKG blood work, oxygen monitoring. I stayed by her side the entire time. It wasn't a heart attack, thankfully. Fluid buildup, medication adjustment, close call. But something else had shifted inside me that morning. Something quiet, something permanent. Laura texted once around noon. "Everything fine." I stared at the message. No apology, no concern, just efficiency. "She's stable," I replied. A thumbs up emoji came back. That was it. That evening when we returned home, Laura was sitting at the kitchen island. "How is she?" she asked without turning around. "Stable?" I said. She nodded. "Good." I stood there for a moment studying her. 28 years of marriage. We'd built this house together, raised 2 stepchildren from her first marriage. Shared holidays, shared funerals, shared retirement plans. And yet, that morning, when it mattered most, she had drawn a line I hadn't known existed. Not my problem. Figure it out. The words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. They were cold. And they told me something I hadn't allowed myself to see. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her responsibility. And responsibilities can be declined. That night after Laura went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I opened my laptop. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe I just needed something solid, something factual, something that didn't depend on emotion. So, I logged into our joint bank account. And that's when I saw it. Transfers I didn't recognize, large ones, frequent ones. I leaned closer to the screen. My pulse slowed instead of quickened because suddenly the morning made sense. And for the first time all day, I didn't feel hurt. I felt clear. The next morning, Laura called me 31 times. But that was later. First came the numbers. And numbers, unlike words, don't lie. If you had asked me a year ago whether I trusted my wife, I would have said yes without hesitation. Not the reckless kind of trust you see in young couples who still believe love alone can carry a mortgage. I'm 68 years old. My trust was the kind built through decades of routine shared calendars, shared passwords, shared doctor appointments. The quiet confidence that comes from surviving things together. Or at least that's what I believed. Laura and I married when I was 40. She had 2 children from her first marriage. I had just made senior partner at the accounting firm where I worked for 35 years. She was warm back then, charismatic, the kind of woman who could host Thanksgiving for 20 people without breaking a sweat. She stopped working 12 years ago. "It doesn't make sense for both of us to kill ourselves," she had said. "You make more anyway." I didn't argue. I was proud to provide. It felt like purpose. Over time, I moved my paycheck into our joint account. I added her as an authorized user on every credit card. When I retired at 65, I rolled my pension and 401k into accounts managed under both our names. It never crossed my mind that I should do otherwise. Looking back, I can see the subtle shifts. They weren't dramatic enough to alarm me, just small adjustments in tone. When I hesitated over a large purchase, she'd say, "You worry too much." When I asked about a charge I didn't recognize, she'd smile and say, "Relax. It's handled." When I suggested meeting with a financial advisor together, she'd respond, "You're the numbers guy. I trust you." Trust that word again. But somewhere along the way, I stopped reviewing statements as carefully. Retirement changes you. You begin to value peace more than precision. And Laura valued comfort. The house renovations, the vacations with her friends, the investment opportunities that never seemed to produce returns. I questioned some of it, but not enough because challenging her meant friction, and friction at our age feels exhausting. After her words that morning, "Not my problem. Figure it out." I couldn't sleep. So, I did something I hadn't done in months. I combed through the accounts. The first transfer I noticed was from 4 months ago. $8,500 wired to an unfamiliar business account labeled consulting. The next month, $12,000 investment seed, then $6,200 withdrawn in cash. My stomach didn't drop the way it might have when I was younger. Instead, I felt a strange steadiness. I pulled up the credit card statements. Designer purchases totaling over $14,000 in the past year. Jewelry, weekend spa packages, a boutique travel agency. That SUV in the driveway, it wasn't fully paid off after all. It was financed through a separate line of credit I hadn't known existed. A line of credit tied to our home equity. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. For 28 years, I believed we were making decisions together. Now, I saw the pattern. The transfers weren't random. They were escalating. $8,500, $12,000, $15,000. Like someone building a parachute in secret. I opened another tab and checked the property records online. The deed to our house was still jointly held. Good. But the SUV loan listed only her name. That was new. I scrolled further. 3 inquiries on her credit report, business loan applications dated within the last 60 days. The day she told me my mother's emergency wasn't her problem, she already had 1 foot outside our marriage, and I had been the one funding the exit. I sat there until 2 o'clock in the morning. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I replayed the last few years in my mind. The way she'd started taking phone calls in another room, the new friends I'd never met, the sudden insistence that she needed financial independence. I had interpreted it as healthy autonomy. Now, it looked like preparation. The painful part wasn't the money. It was the realization that while I was thinking about cardiologist appointments and medication refills for my 82-year-old mother, my wife was thinking about liquidity. I heard her footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the laptop. She appeared at the doorway, robe wrapped tightly around her. "Why are you up?" she asked. "Couldn't sleep." She nodded, then paused. "You seem distant today." I looked at her carefully. "I was thinking," I said. "About what?" "Responsibility." She frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "Nothing," I replied. She studied me for another moment, then shrugged and went back to bed. That shrug, that same shrug from the morning. It wasn't cruelty. It was dismissal. The next day, while she was at Pilates, I called my former colleague, Daniel. He'd been my financial advisor for years before I retired. "Dan," I said, "I need to review everything." He didn't ask many questions, just scheduled me for the following morning. When I hung up, I walked past the kitchen island where she had sat the day before. I imagined the moment again. My mother struggling to breathe. Me asking for help, her lifting her coffee mug. "Not my problem. Figure it out." The sentence hadn't just revealed her indifference. It had revealed mine. I had ignored warning signs for years because confronting them felt inconvenient. But something about that morning had stripped away the comfort of denial. If I could drive my mother to the hospital without her help, I could do something else, too. I could figure this out. When Laura called me 31 times the next day, she thought it was about inconvenience. She didn't yet understand it was about exposure, and numbers once uncovered don't go back into hiding. Daniel didn't waste time with small talk. When I walked into his office the next morning, he closed the door behind me and said, "Start from the beginning." So, I did. I told him about my mother, about the car, about Laura's words. Then, I slid a printed stack of statements across his desk. He adjusted his glasses and began flipping through them slowly at first, then faster. "How long since you've reviewed these line by line?" he asked. "Not in detail," I admitted. 6 months, maybe more." He nodded. "Retirement can do that." He opened his laptop and logged into the back-end access he still had permission to use for my managed accounts. Within 10 minutes, he found what I had sensed, but not yet fully understood. "She's been moving liquidity," he said calmly. "Meaning, cash positions, short-term transfers, credit expansion. She's increasing available funds while limiting traceable long-term commitments." I stared at him. "In English, she's preparing for financial separation." The word hung in the air. Separation. Not divorce. Not yet. Preparation. Daniel continued scrolling here. "Home equity line of credit opened 8 months ago, authorized by both of you electronically." I frowned. "I don't remember signing that." "You likely approved something in DocuSign without reading the secondary documents." I closed my eyes briefly. I remembered the evening she'd said it was paperwork to update insurance beneficiaries. I'd signed from my phone while watching television. Daniel turned the screen toward me. $42,000 drawn from the line over the past 7 months. "That money didn't go toward the house," he said. "Where did it go?" "Combination of personal transfers and something else." He clicked again. 3 deposits into a newly formed LLC registered solely under Laura's name. The company address was a co-working space downtown. "What is this?" I asked quietly. "Looks like she started a consulting business." I laughed once under my breath. Laura had never run a business in her life. "She's listed as majority owner," Daniel added. "How much has she moved into it?" He totaled the transfers. I sat back in the chair. The SUV loan, the equity line, the LLC, the withdrawals. It wasn't panic spending. It was positioning. "She hasn't touched your 401k. Daniel said, "That's good. It's protected unless you authorize distribution." "What about Social Security?" "Still depositing into the joint account." I exhaled slowly. "So, what are my options?" Daniel folded his hands. "First, separate your income immediately. Open an individual account. Redirect your Social Security. Freeze the home equity line. Remove her as authorized user on any credit cards issued under your name. Then, consult an attorney." "Will that escalate things?" He gave me a look I recognized from years of negotiations. "It's already escalated. You're just late to the meeting." I drove home with a strange calmness settling over me. There's something clarifying about numbers. They remove ambiguity. They don't care about tone or excuses. Laura wasn't acting impulsively. She was executing a plan. And I had funded it. When I walked into the house, she was at the counter again, laptop open this time. "How was your morning?" she asked. "Productive." She smiled faintly. "I'm working on something new." "Oh, a business idea. Consulting?" "It's early stages." I nodded. "Sounds expensive." She paused for a fraction of a second. "Investment requires capital." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "It does." She studied my face. "You're being strange." "Am I?" "Yes. Ever since yesterday, I met her eyes. Yesterday was clarifying." "For what? Do for me?" She closed her laptop slowly. "Are you upset about the car?" "No." "Then what?" I considered telling her right then, laying out the numbers, confronting her. But something inside me held back. Not fear. Timing. "I figured it out," I said simply. She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't need the SUV." Her expression softened slightly as if she believed the storm had passed. "Good," she said, "because I have meetings all week." That afternoon, I opened a new checking account in my name only. I redirected my Social Security deposits effective immediately. I called the bank and froze the home equity line pending review. The representative asked, "Ross on unauthorized financial exposure," I replied. I removed her authorization from 2 credit cards tied to my retirement account. Each action felt methodical, controlled, not revenge, protection. By evening, the bank notified me that pending transactions linked to the equity line were suspended. At 9:12 p.m., Laura's phone buzzed. I watched her face change as she read the notification email. "What is this?" she asked sharply. "What is what?" "It says the equity line is frozen." "Yes." "Why?" "Risk management." She stood up. "You can't just freeze it without talking to me." "I can," I said calmly. "It's in my name." "It's in our name." "It was," I corrected. Her jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" "This is about yesterday." "No," I said quietly. "Yesterday was about something else." She stared at me, searching for emotion. But there wasn't anger there anymore. Only calculation. She picked up her phone and walked into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. I sat alone in the living room. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Then another, then a text. "Did you freeze the account?" I set the phone down because the next part required patience. And when the calls came the following day, 31 of them, they weren't about a hospital visit. They were about leverage. And for the first time in years, I understood exactly who had it. Laura didn't scream that night. She didn't throw anything. Didn't accuse me of betrayal. Didn't even cry. She calculated. That's what made it different. I heard her moving around in the bedroom long after midnight, drawers, opening papers, shifting the soft tap of her phone keyboard. When she finally came out around 1 a.m., I pretended to be asleep on the couch. She stood over me for a moment, watching, measuring. Then she went back inside. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't doubt myself either. There's a certain clarity that comes when denial finally dissolves. Not rage, not heartbreak, just clarity. The next morning at exactly 7:18 a.m., my phone buzzed. Call number 1, Laura. I let it ring. Call number 2. Then number 3. By the time I reached the bank parking lot at 8:05, I had 7 missed calls. I didn't feel triumph. I felt confirmation. Inside the branch, I requested a meeting with the senior account manager, a woman in her early 50s named Michelle, composed and direct. "How can we help you today, Mr. Thompson?" "I need to review asset ownership and freeze any outgoing transfers above $5,000 without dual authorization." She typed quietly. "Are you anticipating litigation?" "Possibly," she nodded. "You'll want documentation of recent withdrawals and credit extensions." "I already have them." She looked up at me, studying my face. "Is this a divorce?" "It's a correction," I replied. She didn't ask further. Within 30 minutes, the equity line was officially suspended pending internal review. Alerts were placed on all accounts. Large transfers required in-person authorization. My individual account was fully activated. When I walked back to my car, my phone showed 15 missed calls. And 1 voicemail. Her voice was controlled at first. "David called me back. There's clearly a mistake with the bank." By the end of the message, the control had thinned. "You can't just do this." At 9:30 a.m., I met with an attorney. Danielle had recommended Susan Myers, family law specialist, 20 years of practice. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back. "Your wife has been repositioning assets." "Quietly." Yes. You've frozen liquidity before she completed the transition. Yes, she nodded. That explains the phone calls. What are my risks? I asked. If she files first, she'll argue financial abuse. I've transferred nothing to myself beyond my earned income. Good documentation is your shield. She tapped her pen lightly against her notebook. Let me ask you something, Mr. Thompson. Why now? I thought about that. Because it wasn't just about money. It wasn't the transfers. I said finally it was the sentence. She raised an eyebrow. What sentence? Not my problem. Figure it out. Susan's expression shifted slightly. That tends to be the moment, she said quietly. The moment when one spouse stops seeing the other as a partner. I nodded. What are my options? You can file for legal separation, protect your retirement accounts, establish temporary financial boundaries, or you can attempt mediation. I don't think she wants mediation. Then protect yourself first. When I got home, Laura was sitting at the kitchen island again. But she wasn't scrolling this time. She was waiting. Her eyes were sharp. What did you do? She asked without greeting. I adjusted risk exposure. She stood up. Stop talking like that. This isn't a boardroom. No, I agreed calmly. It's our house. You froze the equity line. Yes. You removed me from the cards. Yes. You redirected your Social Security. Yes. She blinked once, clearly surprised I wasn't denying it. You don't trust me. The question almost made me smile. I trusted you, I said evenly. That's how the equity line got open. Her face hardened. You're overreacting to one comment. One comment, I repeated. You're punishing me because I had a class scheduled. This isn't about Pilates. Then what is it about? I held her gaze. It's about partnership. Silence stretched between us. You're trying to control me, she said finally. No, I replied. I'm removing the ability to control me. Her jaw tightened. You can't just rewrite the rules after 28 years. I didn't, I said quietly. You did. She laughed once, sharp, dismissive. Oh, please. Because I didn't drop everything to drive your mother. It wasn't about driving. Then what? It was about caring. She folded her arms. So, this is emotional now. No, I said calmly. This is structural. Her eyes flashed. Are you threatening divorce? I'm protecting what's mine. And what's mine? She snapped. You'll keep what you've positioned already. The color drained slightly from her face. You've been digging. I've been reading. She stared at me for several seconds. You're being paranoid. No, I said softly. I was being naive. That afternoon, I filed for legal separation, not divorce. Protection. Temporary financial boundaries pending mediation. The paperwork was precise, clinical, lacking drama. When the process server delivered the notice 2 days later, I wasn't home. But I heard about it because that was the day she called me 31 times. And the first 20 of those calls weren't angry. They were afraid. There's a difference between revenge and recalibration. Revenge is loud. Recalibration is quiet. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I adjusted. And once the system shifted, she felt it immediately because for the first time in 28 years, she couldn't simply assume I would absorb the impact. The process server knocked at 10:17 a.m. I know the time because Laura texted me at 10:19. What did you do? I didn't answer. By 10:22, she called. Call number 1. I watched it ring. Call number 2. Then number 3. By 11 a.m., I had 11 missed calls and 6 messages. The first few were controlled. David, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. You're escalating this unnecessarily. By call 15, the tone shifted. You can't file separation without discussing it. You're embarrassing both of us. And then around call 22, something new entered her voice. Uncertainty. What exactly are you trying to protect? I sat at my desk in the den reviewing retirement projections with Daniel on speakerphone and let the phone vibrate against the wood. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. When you live long enough, you learn something about power. It's rarely about volume. It's about leverage. For nearly 3 decades, Laura had operated from the assumption that I would maintain stability no matter what she did. That I would smooth over tension, cover expenses, ignore irregularities. She had grown accustomed to elasticity, but elasticity has limits, and once it snaps back, it changes shape. At 1:14 p.m., she showed up at Daniel's office. He texted me immediately. She's here agitated. I told him not to engage beyond confirming that I had sought consultation. Apparently, she demanded access to statements. Daniel told her what any advisor would say. You'll need to go through your attorney. That was when the panic truly began. Because panic isn't about money. It's about control. By late afternoon, I finally answered. Call number 31. Her breathing was uneven. David, she said, her voice tight. What is happening? You were served, I replied evenly. Legal separation. Are you serious? Yes, you're blowing up our life. No, I said quietly. I'm stabilizing mine. This is about your mother. It started there. So, because I told you to handle something yourself, you're dismantling 28 years. No, I said, because I realized I've been handling everything myself. Silence. You think I was stealing from you? She asked finally. I think you were preparing for something without telling me. That's called independence. Not when it's funded by joint equity without transparency. She exhaled sharply. You're acting like I committed a crime. You opened a $42,000 credit line against our home. It's our home and you didn't discuss it. I signed you electronically. Yes, I said calmly. You did. The pause that followed was heavy. You trusted me, she said. I did, and now you don't. Now I verify. That evening when I returned home, she was pacing. The house felt different, charged. I spoke to an attorney, she said immediately. I assumed you would. You're going to regret this. Possibly. She stared at me as if waiting for anger, for retaliation. It didn't come. You froze the equity line. You removed me from accounts. You cut off access. I restricted unsecured liquidity. That's the same thing. No, I replied evenly. It's containment. She shook her head. You're trying to starve me out. I'm preventing further exposure. She laughed bitterly. Exposure to what? Your retirement paranoia to undisclosed liability. Her voice dropped. You've been watching me. I've been reviewing statements. You think I was leaving you? I think you were preparing options. And that scares you. No, I said. What scared me was a sentence. Her jaw tightened. You're still on that? Yes. It was a bad morning. It was a clear one. She looked at me for a long moment. You know what this looks like? She said quietly. Financial abuse. I nodded slowly. And that's exactly why I filed legally. Her expression flickered because she understood. Documentation changes narratives. Over the next 2 weeks, mediation was scheduled. Assets were outlined. Retirement accounts separate and protected. Home jointly held subject to evaluation. Equity lines suspended pending court review. Her LLC entirely hers with no further funding from marital assets. The SUV solely her responsibility for the first time. The structure was visible. No ambiguity, no quiet transfers, no blurred lines. The strangest part wasn't the tension. It was the calm. I drove my mother to her follow-up appointment the following Tuesday in a rental car I paid for myself. When we returned home, she studied my face. You look lighter, she said. I feel clearer, I replied. Is it over? She asked gently. No, I said. It's balanced. That night, Laura slept in the guest room. We moved around each other carefully, civilly, but something fundamental had shifted. Not hostility, hierarchy. She was no longer operating from assumed leverage. She was negotiating from equal footing. And that's when the anger truly surfaced. Because equality feels like loss to someone accustomed to advantage. 3 days before our first mediation session, she stood in the doorway of the den. You didn't have to humiliate me, she said. I didn't. You served me at home. That's how the process works. You could have warned me. I did, I replied. When I said okay, she stared at me, confusion and realization colliding in her expression. You're punishing me. No, I said quietly. I figured it out. Reversal isn't loud. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't throw accusations. It changes the structure underneath the floorboards. And when the foundation shifts, everyone feels it. Especially the one who thought it was permanent. Mediation was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a gray Thursday morning. Laura arrived 10 minutes late. Not rushed, not flustered, controlled. She wore the navy blazer she used to wear to charity events, the one that signaled composure and confidence. If you didn't know the context, you'd think we were attending a real estate closing together. We sat across from each other at a long conference table. Between us paperwork, behind us 28 years. The mediator, a man in his early 60s named Richard, opened the session with neutral language. This is a structured discussion regarding financial separation and asset protection. Our goal is clarity. Clarity, that word again. Richard reviewed the preliminary financial summary. Joint home value, retirement accounts, equity line status, her LLC filings, outstanding debt. When he reached the section detailing the credit line withdrawals, he paused. "Mrs. Thompson," he said carefully, "these funds were accessed without prior documented discussion." Laura crossed her legs. "We have shared finances. We don't ask permission for every expense." $42,000 isn't an expense, I said calmly. "It's a position." She shot me a look. Richard raised a hand gently. "Let's stay constructive." He turned to her again. "What was the intended use of these funds?" "Business development for which there are no revenue reports yet. It's early stage." He nodded, then wrote something down. "When we moved to the equity line freeze," she leaned forward. "He froze it without consulting me." "Yes," Richard said, "but he did so legally." She turned to me. "You embarrassed me at the bank. You embarrassed me at the kitchen table," I replied evenly. The room went quiet. Richard looked between us. "Would you like to elaborate?" Laura scoffed softly. "He's referring to a comment I made." "It wasn't the comment," I said. "It was what it revealed." She rolled her eyes. "This is absurd." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "You're dismantling our marriage because I didn't reschedule Pilates." I met her gaze. "It wasn't about Pilates." "Then what was it about?" "It was about responsibility." The word landed between us. For a moment, I saw something crack beneath her composure. Not guilt, recognition. Mediation lasted 4 hours. By the end, the temporary structure was outlined. I retained sole control over my retirement accounts. She maintained full ownership of her LLC and its liabilities. The home would remain jointly owned pending appraisal and potential buyout. The equity line would remain frozen unless both parties signed for reinstatement. Separate checking accounts would be permanent going forward. No shouting, no dramatic ultimatums, just terms. When we stepped outside into the parking lot afterward, the air felt cold and sharp. Laura stopped beside her SUV. "So that's it?" she asked. "For now, you've turned us into a contract." "No," I said quietly. "We were always a contract. I just finally read it." She shook her head. "You've changed." I stopped absorbing. She studied me carefully. "You don't even seem angry." "I'm not." "Then what are you done pretending?" She looked away first. That evening back at the house, she stood in the hallway as I walked toward the den. "You could still undo this," she said. "How?" "It's for Nahan. Lift the separation. Reinstate the line. Trust me again." Trust. There it was again. What would be different? I asked. She hesitated. "I wouldn't say something like that again. That wasn't the issue." "Then what is I asked for help?" I said quietly. "And you decided it wasn't your concern." "It was one morning. It was a pattern." Her jaw tightened. "You're rewriting history." "No," I said. "I'm finally reading it." She stepped closer. "You think you're the only one who felt alone in this marriage?" That caught me off guard. "What does that mean?" "You buried yourself in numbers for decades," she said. "Retirement plans, risk management, always calculating. I learned to build something of my own." "Then you should have said that I tried." When she hesitated again, and in that hesitation, I saw something real. Not manipulation, distance. Maybe she had felt invisible, too. But invisibility doesn't justify secrecy. "You didn't build something with me," I said calmly. "You built it behind me." She looked tired suddenly. "Maybe I didn't think you'd understand." "That's the part that hurts," I said quietly. "Not the money." We stood there in silence for a long moment. Then she asked softer this time. "Is this over?" I thought carefully before answering. "It's not what it was." "And what is it now?" "It's honest." She exhaled slowly. "And if honesty leads to divorce, then at least it's real." Later that night, my phone buzzed again. Not her this time. A notification from the bank. Formal confirmation, equity line permanently suspended pending joint court authorization. I stared at the message. There it was. Finality in small print. Not revenge, not triumph, just story, just structure. When I walked past the guest room, her light was still on. For a moment, I considered knocking. Instead, I went to bed because confrontation isn't about winning. It's about refusing to lose yourself quietly. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not resentment, balance. The next morning, she didn't call me at all. No panic, no 31 missed calls, just silence. And sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's recalculation. 6 months passed. Not dramatically, not in flames, just steadily. The house was appraised in early spring. The market had risen more than either of us expected. Mediation continued twice a month. We moved through spreadsheets instead of arguments. In the end, I bought out her share of the house using a structured rollover from a portion of our joint brokerage account. It was clean, documented, signed in ink. She kept the SUV, the LLC, and the funds she had already transferred. The court formalized the legal separation with a clear financial boundary between us. No courtroom showdown, no slam gavels, just signatures. She moved into a downtown condo in July. I helped carry the last box to her car. That surprised her. "You don't have to," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. We stood in the driveway for a moment. Two people who had once promised forever now dividing furniture. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "For what?" "For clarity." She nodded slowly. "I never meant to hurt you." "I believe that," I said. "But you did." She looked away first and then she drove off. The house felt larger without her. Not emptier, just quieter. My mother sat at the kitchen table that evening, folding a dish towel carefully. "She gone?" she asked. "Yes." She nodded as if she'd known this ending long before I did. "Are you lonely?" she asked gently. I considered the question. "No," I said finally. "I'm settled." And that was the truth. My Social Security now deposits into my individual account every month. The mortgage is paid down aggressively. The equity line remains closed. My retirement projections are modest but stable. For the first time in years, I review statements without anxiety. The LLC she built it hasn't taken off. I know because public filings show limited activity. I don't feel satisfaction about that. Just distance. We speak occasionally quarterly briefly. No accusations, nostalgia, just updates. I drove my mother to her cardiology appointment last week and my own car transmission replaced fully paid. On the way home, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "You look peaceful," she said. "I am." "You forgive her?" "Yes." "And yourself?" That question lingered. It took me a moment to answer. "I'm working on that." One evening in late August, Laura called. Not 31 times. Just once, I answered. "Hi," she said. "Hi." I got the mediation finalization notice. So did I. Silence. I was scared. She admitted. "Of what?" "Of being dependent again." I thought about that. "You were never dependent," I said. "You just didn't trust that I'd stand beside you if you asked." "And now, Tommaso. Now I stand beside myself first." She exhaled softly. "That sounds different." "It is." We didn't say much else. When the call ended, I didn't feel regret. I felt resolution. This story doesn't end with reconciliation. It doesn't end with dramatic apologies or renewed vows. It ends with structure, with boundaries, with a man who finally understood that love without respect becomes obligation, and obligation without clarity becomes erosion. When she said, "Not my problem. Figure it out," she didn't realize she was handing me something powerful. Permission. Permission to stop absorbing, permission to stop smoothing, permission to stop assuming partnership where it no longer existed. And when she called me 31 times the next day, it wasn't because she loved me more. It was because the structure had shifted. Because for the first time in 28 years, she couldn't rely on my silence. If you've ever found yourself carrying more than your share, if you've ever ignored the numbers because confronting them felt too heavy, if you've ever mistaken endurance for strength, I understand. Sometimes strength is not raising your voice. Sometimes strength is reading the contract you've been living inside. Sometimes strength is simply saying, "Okay, I'd like to know what you think." Story 3. My daughter told the whole restaurant at least Mom's new husband isn't a loser like you. I paid the bill and left. The next morning her car was gone and her school account was frozen. That evening my ex called me in a panic. I should have known better than to expect this dinner would be different. But hope's a stubborn thing, especially when it's tied to your daughter. Isla had always been vibrant, sharp-tongued in the way kids are when they're testing their reflection in the world. But lately, her edge had turned cold. Dorian's presence in her life had changed her. Not all at once, but gradually like dye leaking into clear water until nothing familiar remained. Still, I picked her up from campus, complimented her new twist-out curl she didn't even acknowledge, and drove us to a small Italian place just off Fairmont and Pine, where the noise was soft and the bread warm. We sat across from each other, the candlelight flickering just enough to throw shadows across her face. She looked so much like her mother it startled me sometimes. Same high cheekbones, same calculated pause before speaking. For the first 15 minutes, I let her talk uninterrupted. Milan, Versace, the art of brand curation, whatever that meant now. I nodded when appropriate, smiled where I could, and sipped my water with the rhythm of a man trying to keep the peace. She took a picture of her plate before touching it, adjusting the angles, flipping her phone to portrait mode. She didn't ask if I wanted to be in it. She never does. I watched her scroll through filters, then laughed softly at something someone messaged her. I tried to redirect. So, any thoughts on the internship we discussed last month? The green energy startup near your school, Dad? She cut me off, tone syrupy with dismissal. I told you I don't want to work for some eco-nerd company with recycled laptops and like bean bags in place of chairs. I laughed gently, mostly out of discomfort. You might be surprised. That startup's valuation just hit 60 million. She rolled her eyes. Yeah, but Mom says exposure is more important than experience. Dorian's assistant said the same. There it was again. Dorian, I swallowed a dry chunk of bread. Exposure doesn't pay rent. Isla. She lifted her fork slowly, twisting it in the pasta like a conductor drawing out the last notes of a song, then looked right at me. Her voice dropped to that perfect pitch, the one meant for cutting, not clarity. At least Mom's new husband isn't a poor loser like you. The fork hung in the air for a beat too long. I didn't flinch. I didn't breathe. The clink of silverware from the other tables continued like background percussion, but something in me collapsed so quietly it didn't even make a sound. The waiter, a thin man with a tattoo of Saturn peeking out of his sleeve, froze mid-step near our table. The couple beside us stiffened. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scold her. That would have given her the audience she wanted, or worse, the ammunition to claim I was unstable or bitter. I reached calmly for my wallet, pulled out my card, and waved the waiter over without breaking eye contact with my daughter. She looked surprised. Maybe she expected outrage. Maybe she expected a scene. The bill came. I paid. No dessert. No more conversation. She offered nothing, not even a fake apology. As we walked back to her dorm, the silence between us swelled until it could have swallowed a city block. She tapped away on her phone most of the walk unfazed, probably updating some caption or sending a filtered version of the night to her curated circle of people who wouldn't know or care what had really just happened. I stole glances at her, the slope of her shoulders, the quiet confidence in her steps, and I didn't recognize her. Or maybe I just didn't recognize who had let her become. When we got to her building, she gave a distracted hug. It was more of a pat. Really, like she was checking a box. Thanks for dinner, Dad, she said, eyes still on her screen. I nodded. Didn't trust myself to say much else. I watched her disappear behind the glass doors, swallowed by the lights of a campus that didn't need me. Then I turned, walked back to the car, and drove home with a silence heavier than steel. Every street light flicked past like a judgment. Every memory I'd buried for the sake of peace floated up in that drive. Every birthday party I paid for where she clung to Marissa's side and ignored me. Every trip I planned that was too boring or too basic. Every time Dorian got mentioned like he was some sort of lifestyle upgrade. It wasn't just the insult. It was the accumulation. 1,000 small stabs disguised as jokes. Eye rolls and cold silences. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were trembling on the wheel. Not from anger, from clarity. This wasn't about her words. It was about my years of silence, about thinking that love meant never pushing back, never drawing a line. I sat in the dark for a long time after I killed the engine. The green glow of the dashboard cast faint shadows across my empty passenger seat. My phone buzzed once, probably a group promo or bank notification. Allah didn't text. She didn't call, but I didn't expect her to. I leaned back, stared at the roof of the car, and let the moment settle. That fork hadn't just frozen the table. It had snapped something in me clean. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready to be more than a background dad, more than the silent ATM. I was ready to remind her what love with boundaries looked like. And it wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be cruel, but it would be unmistakable. Because respect isn't optional just because I'm her father. And love without dignity isn't love at all. By morning, the sting had crystallized into something sharper. Not grief, not sadness, resolve. I sat at the edge of my bed, the sunlight barely cracking through the blinds, staring at the old framed photo of Isla on my dresser, the one from her 7th birthday, when she insisted on wearing a superhero cape over her princess dress. Back then, she looked at me like I could fix anything. Now she looked at me like I was the inconvenience in her highlight reel. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was finished playing the faceless wallet. The background noise in her designer narrative. I picked up my phone, heart calm, mind focused, and called the bank. I didn't raise my voice or ask questions. I gave them my ID number, confirmed my identity, and requested immediate cancellation of Isla's student card. No need for ceremony, just a decisive click that cut the fuel line to her extravagance. The tuition payment, I didn't cancel it. I froze it. A legal nuance that mattered. I wasn't sabotaging her education. I was pausing it, pressing hold until the character of the student matched the size of the investment. Afterward, I stood in the hallway of my house, staring at the keyhook where the spare Audi fob still hung. The car, her precious, sleek, cherry red Audi coupe, had been a graduation gift, my savings, a reward for surviving high school with decent grades and her mother's chaos. At the time, I thought it was the right move, a gesture of trust. But all I'd really done was give her a throne she now used to mock me from. I grabbed the keys. The drive to her campus was quiet, uneventful. No calls, no signs, just me, my thoughts, and a growing calm that I hadn't felt in years. When I pulled into the university lot, I spotted the car immediately. Sparkling under the morning sun like a monument to misplaced affection. No one was around. The students must have still been in classes or asleep. I approached with slow steps, pressed the unlock button, and slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled like a perfume. I didn't recognize something expensive and clinical. There was a Balenciaga tote tossed carelessly on the passenger floor, a half-empty water bottle in the cup holder, and a used lip gloss on the dash. A snapshot of a curated life now interrupted. I adjusted the seat, turned the key, and drove away. I didn't speed. I didn't gloat. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just headed home with the same silence she'd driven into my life months ago. By noon, the car was parked in my garage. He's tucked into the drawer beneath the utility sink and a tarp pulled neatly over the hood. I stood there a moment longer, my hand resting on the fabric, feeling like I had just sealed up something bigger than metal and rubber. I had taken back something that had started to define the power imbalance between us. Not for revenge, not for punishment, for clarity. Back inside, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat down with my laptop. I logged into her school portal, reviewed the tuition summary, and set the freeze into official motion. My name was on the financial account, my bank, my funds. I hadn't needed permission to pay. I didn't need permission to pause. It was past 1 p.m. when I finally settled into the couch. I wasn't watching the clock. I knew the explosion would come, but I also knew it wouldn't be immediate. No, Isla wouldn't notice right away. She never checked her balances. She didn't need to. Things had always just worked. There'd be a cafe run, a card decline, then confusion, then panic, and that's when the wake-up call would begin. The hours passed slowly. I fixed a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. I vacuumed the floor. I even cleaned out the fridge, not because I was nervous, because I felt like I'd reclaimed some space in my own life that I hadn't touched in years. That cabinet, I hadn't opened it in 6 months. That fridge. It was full of takeout containers I'd bought for weekends. She rarely showed up for. Every corner I cleaned felt like a piece of myself coming back. By mid-afternoon, my phone vibrated once, then twice. I ignored it. At 3:15 p.m., an email ping. University Billing Department. Isla's payment had been returned due to administrative hold. I imagined her seeing the notification on her app, fingers fumbling as the screen told her she'd been locked out of the financial cocoon. At 3:47 p.m., the text began, "Dad, something's wrong with my card. Did the bank mess up?" Then, also, "The car is gone. Was it towed?" Then a single angry question mark. I didn't respond. At 4:05 p.m., another message. "Okay, not funny. Call me now." Still nothing. By the time I heard the knock at my door, 5:42 p.m. sharp, I wasn't surprised to see silence stretching out longer than usual. But I didn't answer. I just stared through the peephole at the empty porch, wondering if it was just some delivery or a neighbor, maybe even her. But she wouldn't come all the way home, not without backup, not without spinning the story to someone first. And I was right. At 5:09 p.m., a new message came in from Marissa. "What did you do?" I smiled faintly because it was never what did she say or what happened. No, just a knee-jerk defense of the child she'd molded into a mirror. The same child who'd called me a loser in public without flinching. I locked my phone, sat back. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to cry. I had acted decisively, calmly. She had no funds, no car, no free ride. And for the first time in a long time, I had peace. Not because I punished her, but because I stopped punishing myself by allowing it. By 6 p.m., the storm arrived. It started with Isla's name flashing across my phone screen. I didn't move to answer. I just let a buzz in my hand, watching her name vibrate against the silence of the living room. The ring ended, then immediately, another call, another buzz, same number, same panic. That told me everything I needed to know. She was spiraling. I set the phone down on the coffee table and walked into the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. The sound of the faucet was oddly grounding. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was the one chasing understanding. She was. When I came back to the couch, the missed call icon was blinking. 2 voicemails, then 3. By the 4th, her voice was no longer angry. It cracked, wobbly, confused, a little scared. "Dad, please call me back. I don't know what's going on. My card didn't work at the store and then I got a notice from campus about my tuition in the car. I don't know where the car is. Did you move it? Did something happen?" She tried to control the pitch in her voice, but I could hear the unraveling, that desperate edge that sets in when the script you've lived by suddenly disappears. She wasn't used to this feeling, helplessness. I hadn't let her experience it before. That was on me. I let the message finish. Then another one began. This time the tone shifted. "I can't believe you'd do this. Are you trying to ruin my life? What the hell, Dad? You can't just pull everything like that." I smiled, but there was no joy in it. Just the quiet confirmation that we were where we needed to be. The pedestal she'd been standing on had vanished, and now she was forced to look at the ground beneath her feet. No filters, no retweets, just real-world cause and effect. Then the 5th voicemail started. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said at dinner, okay? It was a stupid joke. Please, just can we talk?" I paused, sat down, played it again. Her voice was softer, not performative. It sounded real, but I didn't call back. Not yet. I needed her to sit in the moment a little longer to understand that apologies didn't erase damage. They acknowledged it. And she'd never had to truly acknowledge what she'd done before. She just breezed through the consequences. Always catching a safety net I quietly held beneath her. Not this time. The phone rang again. This time it wasn't Isla. It was Marissa. I debated whether to answer but decided against it. The voicemail came through seconds later. "Gavin, what the hell did you do?" She's sobbing. "I just got off the phone with her RA and she's in her room crying because she can't get to class, can't pay for anything, and her friends are all asking why she's borrowing money. This isn't how you parent." There it was, the pivot. No concern for what got us here. No thought about how I felt the night before. No ownership of the poison she'd let grow between Isla and me. Just a spotlight turned back toward me as if I had committed some cardinal sin by finally saying enough. I played the message twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because I wanted to make sure I didn't misinterpret the tone. There was no worry in her voice from my experience. No, it was panic because her version of the story, the glossy perfect mother of the year illusion, was cracking and cracks get noticed. I sat quietly for a few minutes staring at the wall above the fireplace. A photo of Isla and me at the lake 2 summers ago still hung there. She was laughing, really laughing, not that curated half smile she gave her mom's camera. Her arm was around my neck and we were both drenched from a canoe mishap. It felt like a lifetime ago. Back then, Dorian was just mom's new friend, and I was still the person Isla called when she wanted advice on science projects or what kind of sneakers to get. Then came the yacht trips, the personal stylists, the rebranding of a child into a socialite. And now I was the problem. I shook my head and turned the phone over. The screen lit up again. Another message from Marissa. "You're hurting her to make a point. That's not parenting. That's punishment." That one almost made me laugh. Not a real laugh, just a breath through the nose. The kind you make when irony hits too close to home. Because for years, I had watched my daughter get slowly pulled away from me, reprogrammed to see me as the lesser parent, if even a parent at all. And I let it happen. Why? Because I didn't want to be the one who made waves. I thought staying calm, being patient, would prove my love. But love isn't supposed to make you disappear. And now when I decided to reclaim my place, I was the villain. The night dragged on. The phone kept buzzing. More calls from Isla. More voicemails from Marissa. By the 9th message, Marissa's voice was afraid. "You're seriously not going to respond? What are you trying to prove? That you're the bigger person? That you're in control now? She's still your daughter, Gavin. Even if she said something stupid, she's a kid." I turned off the phone and let the silence reclaim the room. This wasn't about control. It never had been. It was about visibility. It was about value. It was about not allowing love to become a one-sided currency that only flowed when I was useful. They could call it punishment if they wanted to. I called it a reset, a necessary one. And if Marissa didn't understand that, well, that wasn't new either. The next evening, I was making tea, no sugar, just green with a hint of lemon, when my phone buzzed with a block number. I almost let it ring out, but something in me said to pick up. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was instinct. Either way, I answered and said nothing at first, waiting to see who thought hiding their number would hide their agenda. Gavin. Hey, it's Marissa. Her voice came through smooth, tight, rehearsed. I stayed silent. She cleared her throat. Look, I know the last couple of days have been tense, but I think we should talk. Actually, I have Dorian on the line, too. Oh, there it was. I imagined her sitting in their penthouse kitchen, probably sipping imported wine, sliding the phone across the marble counter to her husband like they were running a boardroom. The same man SIL couldn't stop quoting. The same man who, for all his wealth and charm, had never once offered to pitch in for anything related to her education. Hi, Gavin, Dorian said, his voice a well-oiled version of sincerity. Look, I know things got heated, but I wanted to reach out, Monto man. Isla's upset. We all are. Really? I didn't answer immediately. I let him swim in that silence for a bit. Let it weigh on him the way his name had been weighing on me lately. Every dinner, every phone call, every subtle jab from my daughter that carried his fingerprints. I understand she said something hurtful, he continued. Teenagers say things. You know how it is. I said worse to my father at that age. She's not 16, Dorian. I said finally. She's 21, a college junior. She's old enough to rent a car and sign a lease. Words matter. A pause. Then his velvet voice returned. Of course. Absolutely. But I think we're all just looking for a way forward here. You've always been a great provider, and I think SIL just took that for granted. If we could maybe unfreeze the tuition, talk about the car situation. Maybe, I interrupted, you can pay her Ivy League tuition. There was a crack in his tone after that. Not loud, but enough. He didn't laugh. Didn't respond right away. Just that slight hitch of a man suddenly unsure where his feet were planted. That's not really something we planned for, he said, slower now. Marissa and I have joint commitments. We're investing in a development project in Tahoe. You know how it is, cash flow. And so no, I said. Another silence. Marissa jumped in, her voice clipped. Gavin, let's be adults about this. Isla's future is still secure, I replied. Calm as ever. She's not out on the street. Her education is still within reach. What's been paused is the part where she spits in my face while I pay her bills. You're blowing this out of proportion, Marissa snapped. No, I'm not. I said sharper now. I've sat through years of subtle digs of being quietly erased from her story because it was easier for you to let her align with a man who buys her designer bags but won't spend a dime on her degree. So, I asked him if he'd like to help. Turns out his generosity ends where his credit limit begins. Now, hold on. Dorian started the charm slipping. No, you hold on. I said, you walked into a family and thought your money gave you gravity. It didn't. It gave you distraction. You gave her gifts. I gave her grounding. And the second she decided one mattered more than the other, I adjusted accordingly. They were both quiet. I could almost hear them recalibrating on the other end, searching for the next angle. Dorian was the kind of man who always thought he could out-talk a problem. But this wasn't a negotiation. This was a consequence. And I wasn't interested in making him feel better about it. I'm not here to make Isla suffer, I added. I'm here to stop suffering in silence. She's just confused, Marissa tried. You're the stable one. You always have been. No, I said I was the invisible one, the silent donor, the man who raised her to feel secure, only to be left in the background the moment someone shinier walked in. Dorian exhaled like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. I continued. Tell Isla this isn't about revenge. This is about recalibration. If she wants support, she'll have it conditioned on respect, honesty, and an actual relationship with me. Not just a credit stream. And the car? Marissa asked. Her voice cracked there. Just a little. It'll sit in my garage until I feel like she's earned it. That car was a gift built on years of showing up, but believing she valued what I gave. Turns out that belief was misplaced. I won't sell it, but I won't hand it back until something real shows up in its place. No one said anything after that. Anything else? I asked. Dorian cleared his throat again. No, I think that's clear. Good, I said, and I hung up before either of them could pivot the conversation again. I stood in the kitchen afterward, letting the silence settle back into the space like dust after a storm. My tea had gone cold. I didn't care. I leaned against the counter and stared out the window, watching dusk roll in over the tops of the neighbors' trees. Dorian, the man with the pocket square and private club memberships, had finally been called to the front. And he had nothing, not a dollar, not a plan, just smooth talk and shallow promises. And Isla, somewhere in her room, would now know that the man she'd held up like a gold-plated idol wouldn't lift a finger for her future when the moment required substance. That realization would come slowly, but it would come. And I didn't need to say another word. The email came at 8:13 a.m. sharp. No greeting, no warmth, just a subject line that read, "Legal notice, breach of verbal agreement." I didn't need to open it to know who sent it. Marissa had always been efficient with her threats, concise, sterile, and dressed up in official language to give her the illusion of power. But I clicked anyway, sipping my coffee as her words unfurled in full condescension. She accused me of violating an agreement, of disrupting AITAH's education, of emotional coercion through financial control. Her phrasing was textbook manipulation, accusatory, and self-righteous. And then came the line that made me laugh out loud, nearly spilling my drink. "You promised to pay for her college. That's on record." I leaned back in my chair, still in the robe. I hadn't bothered changing out of the robe she used to mock as Gavin's sad dad uniform back when she was still throwing verbal knives with a smile. I reread her email, shook my head, and then opened the digital folder I'd kept tucked away since the divorce, the one labeled custody and financial agreements. I found the clause in under a minute. Section 14.4, line 6. The undersigned agrees to fund the child's education provided mutual respect, cooperation in co-parenting, and continued contact is maintained. Clear as day, no ambiguity. I hadn't pulled this trigger on impulse. I wasn't reckless. I was deliberate, and I had proof. Every dollar I contributed, every boundary I'd drawn, every moment I was excluded from her milestones while still footing the bill, it was all documented. Still, I wasn't about to go to war without reinforcement. I called Rena. Rena wasn't technically my aunt, but after my mother passed, she stepped in as a kind of emotional scaffolding. A former family court clerk turned part-time legal researcher, she knew her way around custody battles better than anyone I trusted. She also had zero tolerance for Marissa's games. I forwarded the email to her and 5 minutes later, she called back, already chuckling. "She really sent this?" "Yep." Rena sighed. "She's banking on you folding. Old habits. She used to throw fits in court, too. Remember? Storming out when the judge didn't rule her way. She says, 'I'm using money to punish SIL. You're using money to enforce boundaries,'" Rena said, "Big difference. And the clause holds. I'll send it over to Patty. She's a paralegal with the MacArthur Group now. She'll look it over and confirm. But I'm telling you, Gavin, you're solid. Thanks. Also," she added, voice darkening with humor, "send Marissa a copy of the class. Just that line. No commentary. Make her read it and stew." I laughed. Tempting. You need to remind her that your spine didn't dissolve in the divorce. You let her forget too long. We hung up. I drafted a response to Marissa's email. No emotion, no long explanations, just an attached PDF with the highlighted clause and one line beneath it. See section 14.4. Still applies. I clicked send. The silence that followed was immediate and glorious. For 2 whole days, there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no surprise messages from Isla. I imagine they were regrouping, probably sitting around Dorian's granite island trying to decide if they could afford to push this further, but they wouldn't because Marissa hated losing and going to court over this with evidence stacked against her. That would mean losing loud. And Judge Elbethwin. She didn't tolerate drama. She had ruled on our original agreement. Old school, clinical, sharp as a scalpel. I still remember her looking Marissa in the eye during one hearing and saying, "Custody is not ownership. Neither is support. You didn't play chicken with Beth Kwan." She'd steamroll you in a paragraph and never blink. I started sleeping better after that. Not because things were resolved, but because I wasn't bracing for the next blow. The weight had shifted. I no longer felt like the defendant in my own story. I was reclaiming authorship slowly, quietly. One afternoon, I opened a drawer in my office and found a photo strip of Isla and me from a booth at the state fair. She was maybe 11. Her braces had just come in and she hated smiling, so I made funny faces to get her to laugh. I stared at it for a long time, then tucked it into my wallet behind my license. I hadn't looked at that photo in years. That same evening, a text arrived from Marissa. Short, cold, the kind she reserved for when she had no more leverage. Received. Will not pursue further. That was it. No apology, no attempt at resolution, just a white flag dressed as a statement. I replied with a single word. Understood. I didn't need her to bend. I just needed her to back off. The following morning, I got a message from Patty, Rena's paralegal friend. She confirmed the clause was airtight and even offered to file a protective stipulation if Marissa tried any more legal harassment. I declined for now, but I appreciated the backup. I stood on my porch that afternoon, coffee in hand, staring out at the old oak tree used to climb. I remembered how she once got stuck up there, cried until I brought the ladder out and climbed up myself to bring her down. She had clung to me like I was the only person who could keep her from falling. I missed that little girl. I didn't know if I'd ever get her back. Not completely. But I wasn't going to keep enabling the version of her that treated me like a doormat. Love didn't mean unconditional access to your self-worth. And if it took freezing tuition, reclaiming the Audi, and enduring courtroom threats to retach that, then so be it. I hadn't started the war. But I sure as hell wasn't going to lose it by staying silent. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't ask for music or TV to fill it. It just held space. And for once, I let it. I stood in the hallway, fingers brushing along the worn edge of the picture frame that still held Isla's second grade class photo. She was missing a front tooth in that picture, smiling so wide her eyes crinkled at the corners. Her tiny fingers were clutching a homemade paper crown labeled Star Reader. I used to come home from work early just to hear her read those books out loud, stumbling over big words, but never giving up. I remember the way she'd look at me like I knew everything. That look had been gone for a while now. Her silence this time was different. Not petty, not performative, just absent. No new texts, no passive-aggressive messages forwarded through her mother. No veiled quotes on her social media, just blank space. And then that morning, a ping. A simple message that blinked onto my phone screen like it wasn't carrying the weight of 1,000 cracked pieces. I didn't mean it, Dad. I was just mad. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't respond right away. What do you say to that? Where do you even begin? Minutes later, another message. I feel like I messed everything up. That one hit deeper. Not because it fixed anything, but because it didn't pretend to. There was no blame shifting. No, you took it wrong or I was joking. Just 4 words that acknowledged her part. For words I never thought I'd hear from her. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone still in my hand, and opened the old keepsake box I kept tucked away in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Inside were photos on her 4th birthday, icing smeared across her cheeks as she wore a cardboard crown, a crumpled middle school science fair ribbon that read, "Honorable Mention," and gold letters, the letter she wrote me at age 10 that began, "Dear Dad, I think you're better than Batman." I had saved it all. And yet somewhere along the way, I had let myself become invisible. Not out loud, not all at once. It started with canceled weekend visits because of school projects, then vacations she no longer had time for. Phone calls that turned into one-word replies, and finally full silence, broken only when a bank transfer failed or a payment needed authorizing. That's what I'd become, a contingency plan. And now the words I've been waiting for came dressed in shame instead of defiance. I picked up the photo of her holding that science fair ribbon. Her braces freshly installed and her expression one of stunned pride. I remembered how she'd called me from the school hallway that day. Her voice beaming through the phone. I didn't win, but I didn't quit. Dad, you were right. Back then, I was the first person she ran to with good news. The first one she needed. And no, now she had Dorian with his watch that cost more than my car and his words that rolled off the tongue like sales pitches. She had Marissa, the master curator of image and presentation. And yet, when it all fell apart, when the money stopped, the Audi vanished, the tuition froze. It wasn't them she texted. It was me. Because under the branded sheen and boutique veneers, she still knew who'd been the constant, the dependable, the fixer. I didn't reply right away. I wanted the silence to settle around her the way it had settled around me for years. Let it do what words couldn't. But I needed her to know I saw her message. That it didn't disappear into the void like mine so often had. So I wrote I know. That's it. I didn't say it's okay because it wasn't. I didn't say don't worry about it because she needed to. I said I know because she needed to feel seen, acknowledged without being absolved. Later that night, I made tea and sat on the back porch. The wind had picked up, pushing dry leaves across the deck in little spirals. It was the kind of evening that usually made me feel lonely, but not this time. This time, I felt something else, something quieter, like peace in transit. She texted again. Do you still have the car? I smiled. That was law, half apology, half negotiation. The bridge builder trying to secure safe passage back. Yes, I replied a beat later. Do you think I could earn it back? It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a plea. It was a question rooted in accountability. Maybe, I wrote. But you'll have to show me how much it means to you. She didn't text back right away, but when she did, it wasn't about the car. I miss when things weren't so weird between us. I stared at that message for a long time. I typed, Deleted, retyped. Me, too. But weird can get better if we both work on it. No reply came that night, but I didn't need one. I went inside, turned off the lights, and for the first time in months, slept without checking my phone every hour. The next morning, I woke up to one last text. I want to fix this, Dad. I don't know how yet, but I want to. That was all I needed. Not a performance, not a polished apology, just intention. She'd chipped the ice herself. And the girl in the crown, the one who thought I was better than Batman, she was still in there somewhere. And now she was trying to come back. The call came just before noon. I was standing in the garage wiping my hands clean after rotating the tires on my old Civic. Something I hadn't done in years, mostly because I hadn't needed to. But that morning, I felt like fixing something, even if it was just rubber and bolts. The phone rang and I froze when I saw her name, Isla. My thumb hovered over the answer button. I could feel the ghosts of our last conversation standing in the room like silent judges. The version of her that sat across the dinner table, dripping contempt. The voice that called me a poor loser in public, but also the kid who used to call just to tell me she aced a quiz or needed help with her resume. The one who asked for my pancakes every birthday. I took a breath and answered, "Hey." There was a pause on the other end, then the sound of her exhaling, "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, not weak, just stripped of the layers she usually wore to sound older, cooler, more like the curated version of herself that lived online. This was Isla with the filter off. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really am." I sat on the edge of the workbench and said nothing at first. I wanted her to speak without being rescued. She continued. "I didn't mean what I said. I was mad and I knew it would hurt and I said it anyway. I thought you'd just take it. You always take it." That part hit. She didn't mean it as a compliment, but it told the truth. I had taken it for years. The dismissals, the slow erasure, the way she and Marissa rewrote history like I'd only ever been a silent thunder. I'd absorbed it all, hoping things would swing back, hoping love meant never having to force respect. "I would have," I said quietly. "Until you made me invisible." There was a long silence after that. Then she said, "I didn't realize I was doing that." "I know," I replied. "But that's the problem. You didn't realize because you didn't have to. I made it too easy." Her voice cracked. "I feel like I messed everything up." "No," I said, not to comfort her, but to correct her. "You messed up. Not everything. And you're still my daughter. But we don't get to skip the hard part just because we love each other." She sniffled, and I could tell she was crying. Not performative tears. The quiet kind. The kind you cry alone in your dorm room when the armor slips. "I miss you," she said. I swallowed hard. "Then let's fix it together. But it has to be real this time. No more calling when something breaks or when you need a check. I want a relationship, not a transaction." She was quiet again. Then, "Okay, what does that look like?" I stood, walked back into the house, and sat down at my desk. I pulled out a sheet of paper. "I'm going to help with your tuition," I told her, because I still believe in your future. "But the Audi stays here for now. And the student card won't be renewed yet. We're going to start over. You're going to earn them." I expected resistance. Maybe a groan. Maybe a quick, "You're being dramatic." But none of that came. Instead, she said, "Okay." I blinked. "Really?" "Yeah." She whispered. "I think I need to." Later that day, I emailed her a written agreement, not legal, just symbolic. A contract between a father and his daughter. It had 3 points. 1. Respect is the baseline, not a reward. 2. We speak honestly, even when it's hard. 3. No more Dorian praise sessions at my expense. She signed it within the hour. Marissa texted later that night, "So she told me about your little contract. Controlling much?" I stared at the message, then deleted it. I didn't need her validation. I wasn't negotiating with her anymore. She could stay in her corner of curated narratives and glass countertops. Isla texted the next morning. I read it again. "I want to keep it in my drawer." She'd printed it. Physically, that meant something. The days that followed weren't suddenly magical. She didn't call every hour or send me morning selfies, but she checked in. A real check-in. Hey, Dad. How was your meeting kind of message. Do you still have that chili recipe kind of call, and that meant more than the Audi ever could? One night, she sent me a photo. It was of the two of us at the beach when she was 9. I was tossing her into the air and she was mid-laugh mid-flight. Her caption read, "I didn't realize how safe I used to feel. I want to get that back." I stared at the image until my eyes stung. She was trying, and so was I, not as the bank, not as the background, but as her father, which meant this was only the beginning. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it got after Marissa stopped texting. Not just in the literal sense. No more unsolicited opinions on my parenting. No more veiled insults, but something deeper, like the static had finally cleared, and I could hear my own thoughts again. It was strange being left alone without being ignored. For years, I'd been present in AITAH's life, yet treated like an intruder. But now that the dust had settled and her calls were consistent, her words less curated, I knew we had crossed a threshold. Rena was the first to say it out loud. Finally. Boundaries, she said, her voice crisp with satisfaction as we sat on her front porch sipping ginger beer. You've been running a charity for too long, Gavin. This is the first time I've seen you run your household like a man who knows his value. I grinned. It only took losing the Audi, freezing tuition, and a meltdown at a linguine dinner. She smirked. Whatever it took. That afternoon, I drafted a final message to Marissa. Not an invitation for more debate, not another volley in a long history of passive-aggressive co-parenting. Just a line in the sand, something clear, something I could stand on regardless of her response. Marissa, this will be my last message. Unless it's about Isla's immediate health or safety. No more games. No more sabotaging co-parenting. No more loyalty tests. If you want Isla to thrive, don't poison her against me again. I hovered over the send button for a moment, then tapped it. I didn't expect a reply, but a reply came. One word, understood. Short, frosty, but controlled. And that told me more than a paragraph ever could. She knew she'd lost control of the narrative. She knew the Gavin she used to roll over with clever digs and condescending smirks wasn't the man on the other end of the screen anymore. And Dorian, the $sign in designer shoes. I hadn't heard from him since the call, no emails, no voicemails, not even a vague threat to reconsider Isla's living situation. Silence. I imagined it aided him not being able to spin his usual charm into another fix. For all his charisma, he never stepped up when it mattered. Isla had learned that too. She told me during one of our calls. He said this was between you and Mom, that he didn't want to get involved. Did that surprise you? I asked. There was a pause on her end a little, but not really. He's good at speeches, not follow through. That's when I knew she was seeing him clearly. Finally, the pedestal had cracked. She wasn't angry about it. She was adjusting. Her tone wasn't bitter. It was grounded. In the weeks that followed, Slaw kept her side of the agreement. She called every 3 or 4 days. Nothing elaborate, just checking in. Sometimes she'd ask questions about how to negotiate a group project. Other times, she'd tell me about a tough day or about a professor who gave a vague midterm rubric. She even asked if I still had that old bookshelf we built together during her freshman year. Said she missed having something in her dorm that felt like home. I found it in the basement, dusted it off, and drove it over myself. She met me outside her dorm in sweatpants and messy hair, no makeup, no phone in hand, just Isla, the one I used to know. She helped me carry the bookshelf upstairs, and we didn't say much while we did it. But after we set it down and she began sliding her books into place, she said something I'll never forget. Thanks for not giving up on me. I looked at her for a long second. Thanks for making it worth it. We didn't need more than that. Not that day. After I got home, I sat on the back porch and watched the sun dip below the fence line. There were no new texts from Marissa, no veiled threats from lawyers, just the kind of quiet that means things are working again. Even if the repair is still in progress, I had set the new standard, not just for Isla, but for myself. No more invisible parenting. No more pretending that peace means silence. I wasn't here to be convenient. I was here to be consistent. There's a difference. The next morning, I emailed Isla's school and confirmed the tuition payment. I didn't do it with fanfare. I didn't announce it to her. I just did it because that's who I am. The dad who shows up. The one who pays for the roof. Yes. But also the one who expects the walls to stand up in return. Later that week, I got a text from her. Mom told me you sent her a message. She's been really quiet. I typed back. Good. That means she's thinking. A minute later, you're different now. In a good way. I see it. I smiled at the screen. So are you. I'd spent years thinking love meant giving without asking. That parenting was sacrificing silently without expecting even basic respect in return. But I was wrong. Love is a standard. Respect is a baseline. And this was the beginning of something stronger, something earned. Because Isla wasn't just coming back to me. She was becoming someone I wanted to know again. The Audi sat under a gray tarp in my garage like a forgotten trophy. Every Saturday morning, I pulled it back halfway, Just enough to check the tires, wipe the windshield, and run the engine for 10 minutes so the battery wouldn't die. I kept it clean. Not out of nostalgia, but because I still believed in what it could symbolize. Not entitlement, not reward, but restoration. Earned restoration. The first time Isla asked about it, it was in passing. We were on a video call, her hair in a messy bun, no makeup, no filter. She was in her dorm room, hunched over a chemistry book. I could see sticky notes everywhere behind her. And for the first time, it looked like a space she actually lived in, not one curated for social media. So, she said, eyes flicking down. Do you still have the car? I smiled faintly. Still in the garage? She hesitated, then nodded. Do you think I could? I mean, maybe by summer, maybe, I said, leaning back. We LLC. She didn't push. That alone told me how much had shifted. The old slaw would have thrown a fit, called me dramatic, maybe even looped her mother in to make it a spectacle. But this Isla, this version of my daughter, was learning how to ask without assuming. And that, more than any apology, was what I'd been waiting to see. Since the contract, the agreement we wrote together, things had slowly changed. She was using the campus shuttle now or walking, said it made her more aware. She even joked once that it's kind of nice not relying on something with leather seats and Wi-Fi to feel important. That made me chuckle. She was starting to get it. She came home twice that month, not for a holiday, not for a birthday, just because. The first time she helped me fix the porch railing. It had been loose for a year, maybe more, and I'd gotten used to just stepping over the creaky part, but she noticed at the moment she arrived. And to my surprise, she said, "Do you still have your tool set? Let's fix that." No eye rolls, no sighs, just sleeves rolled up, sawdust on her jeans. And the two of us working together again like we used to when she helped me assemble her bookshelves or paint her old bedroom walls coral blush. While we worked, she told me about a paper she was writing on media ethics, about how influencers blur the lines between real and staged, and how dangerous it is when people start believing their own branding. She didn't say Dorian's name. She didn't have to. I could hear him in every beat of her analysis. She was starting to see the man not as a role model, but as a blueprint for what not to become. He got annoyed. She told me quietly when I started calling you more. That sentence landed hard. I put down the drill and looked at her annoyed. She shrugged. He said I was being manipulated, that you were playing some kind of long game. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Did he now? She looked at me serious. It bothered me because I realized he doesn't actually know you. He just sees you through mom's stories. And I did too for a long time. I wanted to ask what those stories were, but part of me already knew. The narrative of the quiet ex-husband who never fought, who showed up with checks but not opinions. The safe one, the one she could frame however she liked because he never said no. I'm trying to unlearn some of that, Isla said softly. I think I believed it because it made things easier. Simpler. That's how stories work, I replied. They flatten people, but real love's not flat. She nodded, pulling at a loose thread on her sleeve. It feels like you're a lot more present now. I had to be, I said, because the alternative was disappearing entirely. After we finished the railing, I made us dinner. Pasta, garlic bread, roasted vegetables. She offered to set the table, something she hadn't done since middle school. No phones, no photos, just the clink of forks, and the occasional laugh over a memory we hadn't shared in years. She stayed the night, took the guest room without asking, and in the morning when I came down, she was sitting at the kitchen table in one of my old hoodies, drinking coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. It reminded me of the years before the divorce, before the rift. Back when mornings weren't something we had to plan in advance. A week later, she came back again, this time with groceries. Her own. Said she wanted to cook for me. You always cooked for me, she said. I figured it was my turn. She made spicy noodles and overcooked the chicken, but I ate every bite. That night, after she left, I went into the garage and pulled the tarp off the Audi completely. I cleaned it thoroughly, waxed it, checked the fluids, the battery, the tire pressure. I didn't know when I'd give it back, but I knew we were getting closer. Each visit was a brick laid slowly across a bridge. We were both walking across, this time toward each other. And yet, I kept the keys in the drawer, not as punishment, as a reminder that respect, once broken, takes time to rebuild. I started noticing other changes, too. She texted just to say good night sometimes. She sent me links to articles she thought I'd like. She even asked if I could look over her resume. One afternoon, I got a call from her RA. Apparently, Isla had volunteered to help lead a peer support group on campus. Something about navigating toxic family narratives and finding your own voice. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I asked her about it, she said, "I'm not doing it because of you. I'm doing it because of me. But yeah, you're part of the reason I finally wanted to." That meant more than she knew. The car stayed in the garage week after week, but every time she came by, she'd glance at it. Never asked, just looked. And I could tell it wasn't the car she wanted. It was the full circle moment. She wanted to know she had earned her way back. Not through perfection, but through presence. So, when she came by with groceries and her laptop one Saturday afternoon, I watched her move around the kitchen like she belonged again. She opened the cabinet, grabbed the olive oil without asking where it was. She told me about a friend who was going through a breakup and how she realized how differently she used to respond to pain. "I'd always just shop," she said. "Distract myself with something shiny. And now," I asked. She shrugged. "Now I try to sit with it. Call someone. Write it down or just show up." I reached into the drawer by the sink, pulled out the AITA keys, set them on the counter beside her cutting board. She stared at them, then up at me. "I haven't finished earning them," she said. I shook my head. "You already did. Not by being perfect, but by being real." She didn't move to take them right away. She wiped her hands on a towel, blinked fast like she didn't want to cry in front of me, and then finally picked them up. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." I smiled. "Thank you for coming back." The Audi in the garage wasn't just a car. It was a measure of trust. And that night, when I heard the engine start and watched her drive down the street, windows down, hair in the wind, it didn't feel like a return to who she used to be. It felt like the beginning of who she'd decided to become. It was a Friday afternoon when Isla showed up at my door with takeout and a book tucked under her arm. I wasn't expecting her, but I didn't need to ask why she came. Some arrivals don't require explanation. They just feel right. I opened the door and there she was, wrapped in a navy coat I hadn't seen before. A familiar crooked smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You always like these," she said, holding up the bag that carried the unmistakable scent of Szechuan chili oil and jasmine rice. "From that little spot you used to drive 30 minutes for." I stepped aside, gesturing her in that place. Still unbeatable. She walked in without hesitation, like she belonged. Again, that mattered more than anything she could have said. No hesitation, no nervous glances around the room like she was trespassing on something she once left behind. It was comfort. It was home. She moved into the kitchen like she'd never stopped knowing where things were. Set the food down on the counter, popped open the containers, and pulled 2 plates from the cabinet. I didn't say a word. I just watched her, letting the moment settle around us like dust in a beam of late sunlight. Then she held up the book. It had a dark blue cover and gold embossed letters. Introduction to Mechanical Systems. I read aloud, eyebrows lifting. "Engineering." She shrugged, but there was something in her eyes. Something steady. "I've been thinking about it. I know I've always leaned toward media, but it always felt performative, like I was acting like someone who loved it, not someone who actually did." "An engineering?" I asked. Her voice softened. "That part of my brain feels honest. Like when I was little and we used to fix the toaster together or take apart the remote just to see how it worked. I remember the way you always talked about systems, not just machines, but people, too. That caught me off guard. I'd said things like that in passing, sure, but I never knew they landed." She handed me a pair of chopsticks. "I figured if I'm going to build something real, I might as well start with something that doesn't care about cloud or filters. Machines don't lie." We sat at the table, steam rising from the food, and talked about her classes, about how she'd met with an academic advisor to start the transfer process into a dual-track program that would let her pivot into mechanical engineering with a media minor. It was ambitious. It was focused. And most of all, it was hers. No influence from Marissa. No stage suggestions from Dorian. Just Isla choosing. It was nearly sunset when she reached across the table and touched the Audi keys, resting in a quiet pile beside the salt shaker. She didn't pick them up. She didn't make a show of it. She just brushed her fingers across them gently. "I haven't driven it much," she said. "Just a class, groceries, that kind of thing." "That's all it's for," I said. "You don't have to earn it twice." "I know." She looked up at me, but I needed to hold off. I needed to make sure I was different first. I studied her for a moment. Her posture, her voice, the calm in her gaze. This wasn't just about a car. It never had been. It was about who she was when no one else was watching. And she had changed. Not in some overnight epiphany, but in the slow, uncomfortable, beautiful way that real growth takes root. "Do you think I'll always be playing catch-up?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. No, I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. She teared up a little, but didn't look away. You were the only one who made it safe to come back. You were always welcome, I said, but I couldn't keep welcoming a version of you that didn't respect what I gave. I get that now. We sat in silence for a while. She reached into the takeout bag and handed me a fortune cookie. Mine read, "The path to peace is through ownership of the past." She laughed. Okay, that's eerie. I smiled. Sometimes cheap paper is more honest than people. She broke hers open. I didn't ask what it said. I figured if it mattered, she'd share. Later, we moved to the living room. She curled up on the couch with a throw blanket, her book in her lap, flipping through the first chapter. I leaned back in my recliner, watching the room shift back to something familiar. It wasn't just her presence. It was the absence of tension. For once, I didn't feel like I was hosting someone I needed to impress or educate. I was sitting beside someone I knew and who knew me. She glanced up. "Do you think it's weird how things ended with Dorian?" I raised an eyebrow. "Ended?" She nodded. "He and Mom are separating. She hasn't told many people yet." I exhaled. I didn't know. He blamed her for letting me turn against him. She said, eyes rolling. Said he wasn't going to compete with some deadbeat dad. I snorted. I didn't realize I was in a competition. "You weren't," she said simply. "Not to me. Not anymore." We didn't dwell on it. I could see she wasn't mourning the relationship. She was shedding it like dead skin that had grown too tight. She was lighter now. And maybe Marissa was starting to see what happens when you try to build permanence on performance. We talked for another hour about her plans, about the summer internship she was eyeing, about how she wanted to start building something, really building. She talked less about brands now, more about impact. And when she spoke about the future, she used we more than I before she left. She stood in the doorway, keys in hand. "I know I said this already," she said. "But thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it." I shook my head. "You didn't deserve abandonment. You deserve to be held accountable. There's a difference." She nodded. "I'm starting to understand that." As she turned to leave, she paused. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "That love without respect isn't love. It's just convenience." That stopped me. It was something I'd thought in 100 different forms, but never said out loud. "And you're not convenient, Dad," she added. "You're necessary." I watched her pull away in the Audi, tail lights flickering as she turned out of the driveway. She didn't blast music. She didn't peel off in some dramatic flourish. She drove like she had somewhere to go and knew how to get there. I walked back inside, stood at the kitchen sink, and looked at the empty takeout containers. A year ago, I would have thrown them away, feeling like something was missing, that the evening had only masked the growing distance. But now I felt full. Not because everything was perfect, but because what was broken had finally been addressed, faced, owned. Isla hadn't come back to me as a daughter who needed saving. She came back as a young woman who understood what I've been trying to teach her all along. That respect isn't a gift you give out of obligation. It's a bond you build with consistency, humility, and time. That love, real love, can't thrive in entitlement. And that sometimes the people who seem the quietest are the ones who loved you the loudest all along.